As I look across the waters here of our homelands, I think about treaty making and what that means to myself and what it could mean to you as you come here to visit me. So I want to share a little bit about what I know and what I've come to know about the 1850 treaty. I look at the hills over in the distance, the mountain range, and the vast amount of resources that are there. And prior to the 1850 Robinson-Huron Treaty, and in two particular locations on the north shore of Lake Huron and the east shore of Lake Superior, the Anishinaabe leadership began to express their concerns with the mining activity that was taking place without their authorization, without their approval. So in this one instance, a group of leaders gathered together and put their canoe in the water, along with a cannon that was left over from the War of 1812 that they still had. They paddled up the shores of Lake Superior to Mica Bay and demanded that the miners that were mining copper in that area demanded that they leave because they didn't have authorization. And so the mining company did leave, but they went and told the Upper Canada government at the time that the Anishinaabe peoples evicted them and told them to leave, that they didn't have approval for mining in the area. And what the government ended up doing was they sent a group of individuals who began traveling the north shore of Lake Huron and talked to each of the Anishinaabe communities about what their territory was, if they were interested in developing a treaty. And within this report that was given back to the government, they provided the authorization to enter into treaty discussions with the Anishinaabe peoples. And this is how they had become to gather at the meeting place identified at Baoting, or what we now know as Sault Ste. Marie. So when the leaders gathered in Baoting in September of 1850, they had a good understanding of what they were looking for from the government, because it was the government that was asking for a treaty to be made so that they can allow for mining activity, timber harvesting. And part of the terms that they agreed to was that the Anishinaabe peoples would reserve their own lands to protect them as they were, without interference from the government. They wished to put these terms forward because of their discussions with other leaders across the territory. The Royal Proclamation of 1763 outlined a process of when and how treaty was to be made, and it had to be at a public meeting, there had to be consent, and only with the Crown could these agreements be made. The 1850 gathering specifically demanded terms that they wished to reserve lands for themselves, and they also wished for a share of any resource benefits in the form of an annuity that was to be increased from time to time. They also wanted to preserve their fishing and hunting rights throughout the territory, and the 1850 treaty, as it was agreed to, did not eliminate or cede or surrender any Anishinaabe rights to the treaty territory. So as I sit here sharing with you my understanding of the Robinson-Huron Treaty, I think about the hope of our people that our understanding will also be understood by federal and provincial governments who are representatives of the Crown who agreed to this treaty. And all we're asking for is our continued use and access of the lands, and to continue to protect them for all of our future generations.
Anine Dorothy, Minogisha.
Anine, bonjour.
Bonjour.
Shin.
Yeah.
Minogisha.
Kenny Richard.
Anine Gary.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Minu Kijaba. Welcome to day 2 of our 2021 Fall Grand Council Assembly online, hosted by Curve Lake First Nation. Happy to see everybody here for a second day. If we're doing this live, I guess we'd be calling the chiefs now if they haven't registered to register, but the ones that haven't signed it yet can't hear me, so I don't think I'll make that call. So starting off this morning, we're going to start with a song from Wishkug Gomung Woman Hand Drum, Janet McHugh. So I see Janet ready, so we'll call on Janet for a drum to start us off this morning.
Camera's the other way, sorry.
Well, it sounds like we may have lost connection with Janet there. Maybe we'll just give her another minute. Looks like she is traveling. One of the difficulties working with the technology, I think we found with the last few assemblies being online is it's difficult sometimes to pick up the drum. And a lot of the drums like to be in a traditional place to do their singing. Actually, I'm looking at the list. We may have lost her altogether at this point.
We have, unfortunately. I will let you know via the chat if she reappears, but
Okay.
otherwise, I think she moved on with Thanksgiving, and hopefully we get that done back in a moment.
Okay, miigwech. So
Miigwech.
maybe what we'll do is we'll go to Dorothy Taylor, the Curve Lake First Nation Gets It. I see she's here, and if she can open us up with the Thanksgiving this morning, and if Janet gets back in the next couple of minutes, we'll get her to finish the song. So Dorothy?
Okay. Naha Bosho, Gitsuak, Gima Wag, Gima Kwawag, Gima Niniwak, Nimkika Beneshikwe, Dishnakas, Wabagog Dodem, Minogajap, Upchigaminwa. I'm going to say a prayer today, and I'm going to, I say miigwech for asking me, actually. So yesterday I used sweetgrass, the wingush, to do the prayers. And today I'm going to use the Bishiki Shkuda, which is the sage. And the sage, the sage is the second medicine that was given to the Nishnavag when we left the Creator side. And it's also considered the woman's medicine. Because of our power of creation, that we can carry life in our body for 9 months and give birth to the family, to the community, and to the nation. And that's why Native women, we consider our women the backbone of our nation. So this is our medicine, because when we're on that time, we call it moon time, we can use this at any time, because we need our medicines always, regardless. So I'm lighting it now. Right when we were in lockdown for the pandemic, Curve Lake First Nation and our chiefs, our chief and our band staff, they looked after the community. And not only did they provide protection and groceries and such to the elders, but they also provided spiritual and our medicines to every household, so that we would have it when we need to pray. Because during this time we were very afraid. We didn't know what everything was all about, what was happening. And so going to the Creator and finding comfort in prayer, finding comfort in the medicines, and finding comfort in the knowledge that everything will be okay in the future. And we're coming out of it now, aren't we? Even though we still are careful with and doing these chief meetings, these Nishnabak Nation provincial meetings online still. And we do have technical difficulties on occasions. Incidentally, Janet is my cousin. So over my head, Saloni, think good thoughts over our bodies, so we only present ourselves in a good way. Our hands, so that our hands will do good work for the people in our family and community. Our heart, so that we will present ourselves in a good way, with clear mind, good heart, and good intention when we approach the Creator in prayer. And so I'm taking my traditional tobacco, which I grew myself in my little garden, and I also mixed all the medicines together. So the wingush, the sage, and the gijak, the cedar, and I'm holding it in my left hand. And I also have my nebe, sacred tobacco, sacred to get you to nebe. Okay. Naha Bosho Gashamanido, Nimkika Benashi Quadishtakas, Wabagog Dordam, Gitsako Shatuyan, Gamishan Gashamanido Gazog, and Shkakame Quakazog, and Ginsako Shatuyan Gamishan. Minawagam Shkike, na Sewen, Gashamanido au Sema, Nimon, Minawaga Winan Nimon, the Goo Picket the Malcolm. Chimiquachka au Kitchatuanabe. The Namata Minsa in a bit, Shanat stoyan in the bit. We do question on chicken random on in the bit. Pana come down to me. Miigwech. Miigwech no misak mishum sakino wamat the beak. Or de wabanang, or de shaunang, or de the babanang, or de giwadnan. Get the German in him, ganad the moyak. Now, Chimiquach Kashem the dos anogam gisha got kuching. Chimiquach em quashka dad young ma. Miquachka out Shemnado Hajwa Minishna au Gema Quewa Gema Niniwak Ginsawak. We took out chicken. We took out chicken one Minawaga Gil no kiwin up namwad. Chimiquach Minawaga Gashamanado. Minapamad Ziong na Sewin. Chimiquach up Chagapane. Hajwa Minish na Jamanado. Chimiquach Kano Dweon. Keep us in Weon. Kinamayon. Naha, Miquach. Conagana. Naha, me ill.
Miigwech, Dorothy, for starting us off this morning with a beautiful Thanksgiving, starting us off in the right way for our second morning. I think that Janet's back on with us now, so I'll see if Janet wants to try and finish her song at this point.
Yeah.
Miigwech, Wishki Gomang, Woman Hand Drum, Janet, for starting us off with the song this morning. So we're at just past 9 o'clock a bit. The staff are keeping track of the chiefs as they register to see when we have quorum, but we don't require quorum to get started this morning with the first few agenda items. So we'd like to get started this morning. Just a reminder that the event is being live streamed again this morning and all day today. And the kits for day 2 are now in the portal. So if you want to access the kits for day 2, they're available to you there. One last information from yesterday, we had a draw at the end of the day yesterday, and we had the prize winner we'd like to announce this morning is Chief Judy Desmoulin. Congratulations, Judy. And the staff will track you down with your prize. So this morning, we're starting off with the recap of day one. I'll try and keep it fairly brief today. We had a pretty busy day yesterday. We started off with our Anishinaabe Nation head Getsik, Richard Asenue, doing a sunrise ceremony before we started in the morning. Then we had our grand entry starting about 9:30 yesterday morning, followed by a flag song. We heard from the chief of Curve Lake First Nation, Chief Emily Witum, and then we heard from Grand Council Chief with their remarks. After that, we went to accepting the co-chairs and then reviewed the agenda and accepted the agenda. That was followed by the Executive Leadership Council providing updates. So we heard from the Regional Deputy Grand Council Chiefs for Lake Huron, Northern Superior, Southeast Region, Southwest Region, and then we heard from Okemukung, unceded territory, Ogiba Duke Pelche. We had a presentation from Ontario Regional Chief Glenn Hare. He presented us with a brief introduction, talked about things going on in Chiefs of Ontario and some of the information going on with the AFN, and mentioning that they had a meeting coming up this week. That led into our health break, and during our health break yesterday, we had language lessons from Isidore Toulouse, and those are very well received. We had them yesterday also at lunch, and I know I had requests to have that information put into the kit. That was followed by Gigondo Dem, and from the Gigondo Dem, there was 5 presentations: energy planning, ministry zoning order, and then a nuclear presentation and resolution. And there's good discussion during that resolution. I know there are some amendments that took place on it, and I think we heard that the different First Nations, the Anishinaabe Nation, can be affected differently by nuclear. There was a harvesting and gathering task force, and again, there was good discussion about that in the shipment letters, and then a presentation from Westaway law presentation about the Southwind case. And again, there was good discussion and good information presented there. That led us to the Wawashkeshdo Dem. We had an update on child well-being negotiations. We had a presentation on Indian Day School and the intention to hire some navigators to assist with Indian Day School claims. Then we had a Canadian Human Rights Tribunal presentation. That led us into the Makwado Dem, the health. We had a presentation on health transformation, and we got an update on where they are with that and the strategic planning they're doing with developing level 1, 2, and 3 priorities. After that, we heard a presentation from Chief Duncan Machano on Northern Superior Youth Detox and Treatment Center, and there was a presentation there and resolution developed for that. And then Jamie Restool, the health director, gave us a brief update on vaccinations and a COVID update. That was followed by a presentation regarding Regional Deputy Grand Council Chief Position Review Committee. We heard from Martin Bear and Jide Afalobi, the consultants. They provided an update on their work plan and the plan to finish by March 31st with their analysis. That brought us to the closing. Oh no, sorry. We did move one item up towards the end of the day. First Nation Leadership Pension Plan. Chief Collins and Fred Velfay presented on that, and I believe there was a resolution for that that we'll have presented to us later on today. So that's a brief recap of what we had yesterday. Like you said, it was a pretty busy day, and I think we were scheduled to finish at 2:05, and we finished shortly after 4. And I miigwech to everybody for staying through and continually had good discussion through the whole day. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to our co-chair, Jenny Restool, for a day 2 agenda review. Jenny?
Good morning, everyone. And I echo Gary's comments. Thank you all for staying online with us. Yesterday, we had a very busy agenda. And again, today we have another busy agenda. So we do ask, if you're able to please stay with us as long as you can. We are scheduled to finish today at 12:30, and we will do our best to stick with that. However, we do need to keep in mind there are some resolutions from yesterday that will still need to be addressed today once we do achieve quorum. So our agenda today, and we want to thank our hand drum and our Gets It for starting us off in a good way. That's always very important in our assemblies. Following my review of the agenda, we'll go into a discussion from the Turtle Clan, which is the Justice Department, and we'll hear about policing, enforcement, and jurisdiction. We will also have a presentation about UNDRIP, following which we'll have the Crane Clan will come forward, and that's the external governance and communications responsibility, and we'll get an update from the Commissioner on Governance. We will also hear from the Chiefs Committee on Governance. They'll provide us with an update. From there, we'll go into a recognition of the Anishinaabe Gizagad, and I know I'm not pronouncing that correctly, but we are very fortunate that we will have our language commissioner that will be here with us to present that resolution. We will then go into a discussion for the support for the Anishinaabe Nation, First Nation decision-making process. From there, we'll have a health break, and we're fortunate again today to have Isidore Toulouse with us, who will also be doing language lessons. And again, his presentations will be uploaded to the portal. From there, we'll have an update about the residential schools, and that will be through the Lake Huron Regional Deputy Grand Council Chief, Travis Brosino. Following which, we'll go into a discussion from the Loon Clan, and that will be a presentation from the Intergovernmental Affairs and Aboriginal Treaty Rights. And we will hear about an update for housing and infrastructure. And then we'll have a discussion about the Chiefs of Ontario Heritage and Burials Elders Advisory Committee. There's an appointment that needs to be made to that committee, so there'll be a discussion there and a resolution as well. Following which, we'll have the opportunity to hear from the Eagle Clan, and that is responsible for the employment training and lifelong learning. We will hear from the KAB, and they'll provide an update about the AES membership. And there's also the opportunity after throughout the day to fold into the resolutions that we missed yesterday. And as well, should we not receive quorum until later this morning, we will be proceeding with the resolutions as soon as we achieve quorum. Following those presentations and the addressing of the resolutions, we will then go into our closing, and we'll have the opportunity for an assembly recap, closing comments by our Grand Council Chief, and closing acknowledgements and Thanksgiving. And then we will finish the day with our traveling song. That's our agenda for today. So again, another busy agenda, but we will endeavor to get through it and ensure that we have the opportunity for good discussions again today. Miigwech.
Okay, miigwech, Jenny, for giving us an update on where we're going today with the agenda. The first agenda item, like Jenny mentioned, is Shikendo Dam today, the Turtle Clan Justice. And we're going to have a start off with a presentation on policing, enforcement, and jurisdiction. We'd like to call upon Lake Huron Regional Deputy Grand Council Chief Travis Brosino, one of the portfolio holders, and Ogama Jason Henry, Deputy Portfolio Holder, as well as Alan Dokis, Policy and Communications Director. So I'll turn it over to that group.
Thank you, Gary. First off, thank you very much, Dorothy, for your opening prayer, and to Mishki Gomeng for the drum. Even though there was technical difficulties, it's always very uplifting. So I appreciate it very much. And to Gary and Jenny, you guys are doing an excellent job. I appreciate your efforts in trying to keep us on schedule. I think for the first two topics right now, it's just policing, but for the second one as well, they're more for discussion. What I've learned over the past bit here is that Anishinaabe, as an organization, as a political advocacy body, we do have a mandate, to contribute to the efforts. I did ask Ogama Henry if he can join me for this conversation, so I'll just open it up. by saying, I've spoken to a few of our leadership in regards to policing. There is a place for people in my position, for the Grand Council Chief, to play an advocacy role for our police services. I know that's known, but I think we're in a good place to help advocate. I had a good conversation with Chief Collins last night. He actually, unfortunately, he can't join us today. He's attending a funeral for one of his relatives, but he did want me, to share, a bit of a message, and the message is simple, and I think it's consistent across our communities. He has grave concern for his officers. He's had two injured recently, and these are officers who have to tend to calls alone. And sometimes they're put in very dangerous situations. So he has definite concern, and he wants the Anishinaabe to make this a high priority, to make policing a high priority, and it isn't just to help the Anishinaabe Police Service. It's to help all of our police services across the nation. We need to elevate, the level of resources that our communities do have for their police officers, and more importantly, there's I shouldn't say more importantly, but with the new provincial legislation coming down and coming to effect in the new year, with discussions around federal legislation happening on policing that I understand COO or AFN may be engaged in, there is some complexities, and I will not pretend like I understand all the complexities, but what I can commit to in my position is helping advocate for the proper resources, not just for this policing on the ground, but to help prepare for all the legislation that is being proposed. So in Chief Collins' words, he just said, we need some good hard lobbying. So I think with that, I'm going to ask if Gima Henry can help with the discussion.
Bonjour, minong gajab kinawia, bonjour kinibo with Nijna cause mong and dodem. Ikonong ajo dana and donjaba. Chimigwetch to the elder this morning and to the drum. Glad to be here in Curve Lake virtually. I had some manuman this morning in honor of Curve Lake's wild rice beds. But in regards to the policing file, that's a major issue in all of our communities. And in an ideal world, we'd have a robust justice system in all of our communities. We're just not there currently. And a lot of work has to be done towards that. And as leadership, we always struggle with, what the best option might be in regards to helping our community. And I know that through Anishinaabe ASCII police services, a lot of lobbying work was done around moving the policing file towards essential services and having that funded adequately. And that work has come a long ways. And I know Travis was part of that in his previous position there. And we're at a position now in 2022 for this new legislation to come down provincially. And it's a big decision, actually, when you think about it. I mean, since the 1970s on First Nations in Ontario, through Section 88, Laws of General Application, OPP have by and large taken care of policing, even through Anishinaabe Police Services and Wikwemikong Police Services. I think that's all the Anishinaabe policing we have. I'm not sure if any other ones in our communities, but that is still flowed through the province and flowed through OPP essentially. So we're at a time right now when we have to be really informed about the decisions we make. And it just muddies the waters when all of a sudden there's federal funding coming down for federal legislation and there's Ontario provincial legislation. And this could all happen spring of next year. So we have to be very cautious moving forward. And I just don't think, from my perspective, as leadership, we've had enough input and enough time to make an informed decision. And appearances make it look like, hey, this is guaranteed money and this is easy solution to us. There's a lot of lobbying that has to be done. I mean, well, if we enter this new by Bank Council resolution, we'd have to opt into this new Police Services Act. If we did that, and if we do that, I mean, many communities will, and probably many communities won't opt into provincial legislation like that. Will they enforce our own community laws? How does that tie into our own constitutions, our own lawmaking authority, our own bylaws, and our own community laws to inherent jurisdiction? We have to make sure that it incorporates all of that. And I don't see that work having been done yet to make sure that it supports our step towards, you know, being autonomous and sovereignty. And we have to make sure that work is incorporated as well. So while trying to fill the gap of having, you know, increased crime severity indexes in many of our communities, violent crimes going up, addiction crises, and all the associated items with that, rather than just jumping to like, hey, let's just jump to one or the other, we have to make sure that we understand what it is we're doing and think ahead. You know, we're always talking to ourselves and to everybody about, you know, 7 generations. This stops an issue today, but where does that leave us in the next 7 generations? And I don't personally, I'm the chair of the APS board, the Nishnawbe Police Services Police Council board. I still don't see enough of the advocacy work having taken place to make sure that all leaders come from an informed decision. And I just want to make sure that we're there and that work is taking place. And that was some of the conversations that Deputy Grand Chief Boissonnault and I had, is making sure that the Assembly is aware of that, and that that we have that mandate to go forward and keep advocating and having our technical staff make sure that chiefs are informed and their councils are informed about this and what's happening and how to move forward. So that's it for me. Just want to make sure that we're taking a holistic approach to this. Jimmy Gwetch.
So if I can, I just want to check in with Mr. Aldo Key to see if there's anything we may have missed.
No, thanks, Regional Deputy, and thanks, Ogama Henry, for that. I think, you know, when we were talking about this agenda item, what you've spoken about was really what we were wanting to focus in on today, and to hear from the leadership on these issues and where they see the emphasis needing to be placed by the organization. And you know, I won't run through, you know, what's in the briefing note and where, you know, where the Chiefs of Ontario is working, where AFN is working. But we know right now, you know, what Ogama Henry was speaking of is Ontario is looking at the development of those regulations around the, you know, being able to implement the changes to the Police Services Act here in the province. And in those sessions that you know, the good work that the Chiefs of Ontario did in coordinating those information sessions for leadership and your communities really brought out the concerns that Ogama Henry just spoke of. And it's complex. We have you know, we have 3 different policing models here within a Anishinaabeg Nation. And, you know, in addition to the capacity, even just to decipher, interpret, analyze what those regulations could mean for your existing, you know, we know the existing models aren't where we want to be, but we don't know what the outcome could be with respect to the development of the regulations, the changes that could come by way of the governing structures that you're currently working within. And oh, it's not simple, well, let's just transition to something new. We as you're saying, there needs to be capacity to do that analysis, to understand, but also there's additional work on advocacy required with respect to how First Nations are being, you know, how they're the opportunities that the province is identifying and saying, well, you could be part of this advisory board. And we know we have a long history of advisory boards in a number of sectors where we clearly have a watered down voice at a large table. And those issues that I just mentioned were brought up in those sessions, and that can be the starting point for what Regional Deputy Travis is speaking of around, you know, that and Chief, his conversation with Chief Collins is that hard advocacy work on those areas needs to be done. Then we get into what is starting to unfold through the Assembly of First Nations and the federal discussion. So what I would just say to this, there are materials from the Chiefs of Ontario with respect to the work on the development of the regulations. We can focus on that. There's also a discussion paper that the Chiefs of Ontario was provided with resources to look at what's going on federally. So that's an important piece for you to look at. You know, I know it's hard to find the time, but that's really important information to start looking at. And I'll just leave it at that. The technical information is there. And this really was a forum for the leadership today to talk about these things and find out where we need to sort of place our advocacy energy. So miigwech for the opportunity this morning.
Well, Gary, I think we just open the floor if there's any questions or advice on the topic.
Sure.
Chief Shining Turtle. Do you hear me, Gary? Okay. Thank you for the presentation. I see sort of four pieces here. One, maybe we need to visit our vision of where we see policing. From where it started to where we are now, there's been lots of changes, and primarily in technology and activity in our communities. When I think about my community from 20 years ago to where we are now, it's vastly different. And the systems that we have from federal governments don't evolve to that. We're still stuck in those old systems. So I think maybe we should be visioning and laying out the path, step one, step two. This is ultimately where we want to see our communities. You know, healthy communities, vibrant communities. So then coming back from that, what are the pieces that you need to put in place? So maybe instead of just jumping into policing, maybe we need to vision what that's going to look like, so we know where we're going to go, as Chief Jason said, about the 7 generations. We know on Friday nights, nobody thinks about 7 generations, right? They're thinking right now. And we have to address that. We have to address the practicality of what's going on in our community. So I want to that leads into some other thing. I'll get into that second and third, but the next piece, and this is my observation, and don't personalize it, please. Having spent, I've been in this world since 1989, in this business of Aboriginal programming, and that all evolved from devolution. And this is Mulrooneyism, and we have not jettisoned ourselves from that, and it's debilitating now. It was very romantic in the 1980s, from 1984 to 1988, and you watch Mulrooney shift all of the government programming. There were 13 Indian Affairs offices in the province of Ontario. By 1988, we have 4. And then they start the devolution process. We have not done any work around that. Here's what I mean. In those days, it was just handoff, right? It was just a handoff. Here's some programming, tribal council funding, tribal councils were formed. We think they're an entity now. That's just a tribal council policy. That comes out of Indian Affairs, folks. And they got that model from the UCCM. So there's been never any structured governance for any, when you look at all these, whether you look at health, you look at tribal councils, you look at social pieces, you look at all these, they all struggle with one common theme. There is no structured governance. Policing, we're looking at our UCCM policing piece, and the struggle is governance. That was never backboned. My argument is that the government's never really cared. They just said, just here's some resourcing, carry on, and away you go. So I think we need foundational governance for police services in 2020. I'm not talking 1988 anymore. I'm talking today. So there is nothing for technology, right? And you watch what goes on in a police force, all the different things that they have faced today, way different from the 1980s, when we had something called community policing. We were involved in those early days of having a person from our community be a police officer right in our communities. That's rapidly changed now. It's changed dramatically. So we need to really look at the governance and get that funded, proper governance for all these institutions. There's going to be health transformation. There's the child well-being piece, right? But there's existing ones that have been having a difficult time. Policing is one of them. It's not had the governance. So that would be one area that I said we need to really have a serious conversation with governments about in terms of funding. The next one they're intertwined, and it goes to where we are with communities. When I look at the data from our policing, the majority, I'm not saying all of it, but a lot of it is dealing with the mental health, the social and health issues. And they just don't have those skill sets. They don't have the skill sets, and that's what I mean. So you go back to the governance, like they're called in, and you've got opioids, you have the real difficult things that they're seeing, and they don't have the tools. So I think you have to have two strands, or if you weave something together, one is visioning, where do we want to go collectively. The second one is the governance. But the one I think that's also more important, that's seeing the dentist when you have tooth decay. We need preventative work so we don't have to see the dentist, which is why do we need to be calling police? We need to look into our communities about the social and health issues that are changing so quickly, hour by hour, week by week, year by year. And when there are no answers in those quick turnaround times, because we're all consumed by the technology, right? It's social media. If we don't get our immediate answer, we don't get police in showing up 2 minutes after we make the phone call, there's something wrong. We have not addressed this, and it's going on in our communities. And I think those, the bigger piece we need to work with government on is they have to adequately fund the social and health needs that are what we're facing today. Because otherwise we're going to be doing this 20 years from now, 10 years from now, and we have an opportunity. We're facing it now. Let's fix it now. Let's face those issues head on, and let's, I talked about this the other day about the legacy issues. That's what police are seeing when they walk into homes on Fridays and Saturdays. They're not walking in to have a cup of tea. There's legacy issues, and this is a plume that is growing in our communities, and that it gets accelerated with drugs, with violence, these illicit drugs that are coming in. We're also watching something else which would be important to us. Populations are exploding in the province of Ontario. When I was in Toronto in the 80s, it was a friendly city. It's not that anymore. So people have ready access. We've also allowed different things to go on. We've got these right-of-ways. So the 400 series highways, these expansive highways allow people to get to communities a lot sooner. I remember when it took us 7 hours to get from Birch Island to Toronto. You can do that if you're smart. You can do it in 3.5 hours. That's a big change. And of course, I've talked about technology, these social media tools. We're not equipped, nor do we have the governance that's equipped to deal with that. So we jump on the police, right? We jump on the different agencies, and they're all in the same boat. And when you peel off all the layers, the governance was never there. It was never there to begin with. And I think we got to argue that case strenuously. Thank you very much for hearing me, Miigwech.
Miigwech, Chief. Just want to mention, like what you're what you're talking about is that the situation that we're in, and it's almost like a mirror of child welfare, where we've allowed the province to come in and duplicate OPP, where it's an enforcement or a reactive measure, where we recognize now with child welfare that, you know, when we begin taking back and implementing our Anishinaabe way of being, it's about prevention, right? And in policing, if more time was spent towards prevention, but under the current model, it's about calls for service. It's about somebody has committed a crime, let's go in and do enforcement and respond to that, and, you know, keep our statistics up to make sure that we keep getting the funding. But it's our policing can and will be much better served, you know, with the police doing the preventive measures. When you see a person going down the wrong track, wouldn't you rather have a police officer go over and say, hey, bud, you know, I see you doing this, like, let me help you out here, you know, rather than just going and putting the cuffs on them and saying you're a criminal now, because it just pushes you over the line on another track. And that's, like, I understand what you're talking about now, Chief Shining Turtle, with where policing started many years ago, but we've just kept duplicating the provincial model and kept, you know, perpetuating that based on what our funders permit. And it's about taking back control and saying, this is what we're going to do as leaders, as Anishinaabe leaders. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to implement this funding. It will be Anishinaabe values first, OPP values second, right? And it's been the opposite way for us. Unfortunately, many police officers have that pushed onto them, and their standing orders are OPP orders. So that has to shift for us. Otherwise, we're going to be stuck, just like child welfare, you know, having CIS come and do their thing. It's same model. We're allowing them to do that.
I see Ogimakwe, Linda DeBosque has her hand up.
Miigwech, Gary, I just wanted to add a few pieces to this conversation. In 1991, when the First Nation policing policy was created, there was to be a follow-up and evolution to that federal policing aspect. Unfortunately, there has been next to no changes in relation to that. So a lot of the First Nations who are within the tripartite police funding agreements have remained in a state of, I would say, complacency or stagnated growth to allow the First Nation police service to grow and evolve and keep up over time, inclusive of adequate resources that would be seen as consistent to the province. And so the province's response is essentially the creation of the Community Safety and Policing Act, in which the legislation has already been approved, and the engagement and consultation has been happening over the last several months, certainly throughout the summer. And the way they, I've participated and listened in on some of these conversations by the province, and when asked in relation to the actual First Nation jurisdiction aspect and the bylaw piece, the enforcement of bylaws, they will not speak to it or commit that under the provincial legislation that that would be enforced or even have an opportunity to be enforced. I encourage leadership to review that piece of provincial legislation along with the regulations. You will see that it becomes delegated authority to the province and essentially to the minister, granting minister full jurisdiction of all policing matters. And we're seeing Chief Shining Turtle, you know, quite appropriately spoke to the mental health aspect and the I guess responses to that. You don't see that. I guess what I'm trying to say is that under the provincial regime, that won't be any better. It's another, in my view, carrot and stick approach from the provincial lens, and an opportunity for the province to, you know, receive federal funding without question to provide services to First Nations. And so we're in this we're in a situation right now. It's okay. Well, this CSPA sounds really good, and perhaps our First Nation officers will feel equitable as to a provincial police officer. But at the end of the day, the service will be the same as provincial service, and really focused on the criminal aspect of things, and not so much the mental health, the Anishinaabe view, the jurisdiction of First Nations, etc. So I think because this has really fallen off tables, and there's I would say silos. I mean, there's UCCM Police Service that has their own tripartite agreement, the APS, Six Nations Police. I mean, we need to really get together with each other to really look at, you know, what's in the best interest, because this federal regime of siloing has left us in a weakened state of advocacy. So I think you know, there are certainly additional steps that can be done, but to be very cautious as to the delegation or opting into a piece of provincial legislation where the minister will have the ultimate authority to any police service, even superseding that of the First Nations. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I've been on this file for a couple of years now, and really looking at the actual wording and language within the legislation. It's very different than what is being stated in these consultation and engagement sessions. So, miigwech.
Chief Shining Turtle, thank you, Linda, for the those additional comments. I wasn't disagreeing with the advocacy. It's getting it right. And part of that is understanding the history. It just hasn't, in all sectors of what we've talked about here, many decades of grand councils, the history's never been kind to us. So I agree with the advocacy. But what are we going to advocate for? More of the same? Less of the same? Maybe we don't know where we're going, and in which case we should take the time to know where we want to go. So I thank Linda for her presentation.
If I could just make a couple of observations, you know, from my perspective, you know, as someone that's assisted with this area for a number of years, and I think Ogama Shining Turtle, your first point earlier on about you know, the vision for First Nation policing is really important, and is something that, you know, is long overdue. And actually, you know, Ogama Linda's comment about, you know, we have all these different pieces, and you know, we really don't, we know that there's commonalities between all the policing models that are a challenge, but all those different models create some challenges with respect to understanding where we go. And that's, to me, part of that visioning for the future around First Nation policing. And, you know, noting my colleagues comment, Adrian Pelche in the chat about prevention-based and grounded in community standards, et cetera. You know, that's probably a really important part of how we frame up what the future of First Nation policing looks like, and having that discussion about, you know, I think what you're saying about what are we advocating for, we need to understand what that looks like across all those different models. But, you know, I suspect when we come together, those are the, you know, what Adrian says and what your guys are saying here today is sort of the foundational parts of what First Nation policing could look like into the future, and give us some, you know, giving those guidance in how we advocate. So it's long overdue. That model, or sorry, that vision for First Nation policing goes back, you know, several decades, as most of you, or a lot of you would be aware, and it's never been revisited in the current. Like, we were always, from my observations, because of the way First Nation policing has been rolled out, like you've been talking about today, we turn into now we're all sort of having to address this with minimal participation because we haven't been it's been pushed down with minimal resources, and then we haven't been able to take the time to go, where do we want to go? So I think that's something I really can connect with here today. Thank you much for sharing that.
Are there any further comments or questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any. So miigwech to the presenters, Deputy Grand Chief Travis Boissonnault, Ogama Jason Henry, and Alan Dokis. The next item on the agenda is Fred Belfay with a presentation about UNDRIP.
Yeah, no, that's me with and if people have questions, Fred, or if they're too,
okay.
Fred's welcome to answer them. But I do want to close out the policing side. I definitely appreciate all of the feedback we out of the several conversations I've had over the past little while. I appreciate it's a welcoming to the organization, to our purpose, in terms of finding different ways to advocate. And I'm going to well, first I want to acknowledge as well, so for the justice file, which I mentioned yesterday, but I believe policing falls under it, and I'm going to be working with Chief Wheatung, Chief Henry, as well as Grand Council Chief, so we're gonna guide this file, both policing and justice overall. But I look to my colleagues for the guidance and the advice. I'm certainly appreciate the comments this morning, and my very real conversation last night as well, with Chief Collins. So we will find a way forward, how to best move on this work, and that's similar to the next topic. It's on UNDRIP. Really, I think along the same lines as policing. I think we may have lost sight in the work that is being done both federally and provincially on UNDRIP. I think by way of updates, Ontario had passed back in 2019 legislation about the implementation of UNDRIP, and it's been sitting with committee for a couple of years now. And we have an opportunity, like I mentioned earlier, with elections coming up. I think we have an opportunity to advocate more forcefully on that front. The same with in the federal legislation, from what I understand, and Fred can add to this after. The federal legislation, the next step includes the development of the work plan to have federal laws amended to be consistent with UNDRIP. This also requires First Nations, we need to articulate our priorities for what a work plan and what actions are needed to ensure that the federal laws are consistent. Some of I think the main laws that we should, 3 of a million, that we should start to take a look at would be the criminal code amendments, the Youth Criminal Justice Act, as well as additions to Lands and Reserve Creation Act. There's definitely a lot of work to be done, and I think we still have to design how to best advocate to ensure that this work moves forward efficiently, both federally and provincially. But I could ask Fred if you want to jump in and fill in a lot of the gaps.
Sure. I think it's important to remember that the full implementation of UNDRIP requires both federal and provincial legislation, because of the way the Constitution of Canada is written with responsibilities divided. One thing I want to highlight was that every opportunity you have as a leader to learn about UNDRIP, to hear about it, even little chunks, I think it's important because over the next couple of years and 10 years, legislation should be revised to be consistent with it. Now, one thing I wanted to focus on today, just briefly, is this free, prior, and informed consent aspect. They've talked about, you've probably heard lots about this. And one thing I wanted to say was that it's used in the declaration. There's 47 articles in the declaration. It's used 5 times in 5 different areas. So that's why it's being spoke of quite a bit. And of course, it's so powerful for Indigenous people. What I see from government is that they're probably going to take the position it's an elevated duty to consult, where the goal is consent, but it's not necessarily required. But the declaration, the UNDRIP declaration, does not say that. It's pretty clear. It's free, prior, and informed consent. So I wanted to highlight that. Now, I think what'll come out of that work plan is the idea that there'll be disagreements between First Nations and government. And how do we resolve these disagreements? So I think it's important for each First Nation at opportunities along the next couple of years to focus at some point on this concept of free, prior, and informed consent. What does it mean? What does it all cover? The scope of it? How do we resolve disputes when we can't agree with government? It's clear it's not the elevated duty to consult, because in UNDRIP itself, they mentioned duty to consult 2 times. And if they meant elevated duty to consult, it would have been clearer in UNDRIP, because they used the 2 terms differently. One last thing I want to mention is in the legislation, the federal legislation, they say that UNDRIP is international human rights. And that's in the legislation. In Canada, human rights is just below the Constitution of Canada. They call it quasi-constitutional human rights. In fact, there's a duty to accommodate to the point of undue hardship human rights. So you got to do your best. If somebody has trouble seeing, do your best to make sure they have the equipment to do their job, and to the point of undue hardship. So what does that mean? If this is human rights orientated legislation, there's a duty to accommodate what we're saying to the point of undue hardship. What is that? It's when the economy of the situation means that it would be self-defeating, basically. So anyway, I wanted to point out this because nobody's talking about this human rights aspect and the duty to accommodate to the point of undue hardship. Miigwech.
Miigwech, Fred. I see Southwest Regional Deputy Grand Council Chief Joe Muskokeman has his hand up.
Just trying to get on, Chairman. Thank you, Fred, for that. Thank you, Travis, for introducing this. I want to follow up with this is that this is such a unique and important implementation step that we're looking at. It goes right back to the previous conversation over policing. It comes down to the capability of what UNDRIP has in it in terms of human rights, but also it has to be related to Section 35 of the Constitution. And this is where I believe that our rights can be enunciated better, not necessarily in constitutional provisions, but acts that will begin to create these pillars of self-government, which Chief Shining Turtle was talking about, and he's absolutely correct on that. So I think we have to be very serious in terms of how, in fact, the application of this is going to take place, and everything that it does, everything we do in terms of moving this forward should be referenced to the understanding, our understanding, not the government's interpretation, as Fred was saying, but our understanding of our constitutional rights that will flow through UNDRIP. So I just wanted to make those comments, Mr. Chairman. It's a very serious discussion that needs to take place, and it's not something that we should take very lightly. Miigwech.
Okay, Miigwech, Regional Deputy Grand Council Chief, for those comments. I'll go back to the presenters. Are there any more comments or are there any more questions for the presenters? I'm not seeing any hands up. Is there any closing comments from Regional Deputy Grand Council Chief Boissonneau?
Yeah, I just, if there's no questions specifically, I think with all of our conversations around the advocacy and how to go about it, we definitely we hear you, and you know, we're gonna use you know, your comments and your recommendations, you know, collectively to do the good work. I think to close out for me, she doesn't know I'm going to do this, but today's Bring Your Child to Work Day. No. So I have a 13-year-old here, my 13-year-old, my firstborn, the heir to my debt. She'll be joining us for the day. You can't see her because I have the background, but she'll be listening to everybody's wise words for the day. So I just wanted to acknowledge my daughter, Shia Busno.
Okay, miigwech and miigwech to the presenters and the Shiken Dodem. We're going to move on to the next agenda item with the Ajijak Dodem, which is the Crane Clan, external governments and communications. We have 4 presentations scheduled under this. So we'll start off with the first one, and I'd like to introduce our former Grand Council Chief, the Governance Commissioner, Patrick Wadase Madabi, for an update on Commission on Governments.
Good morning, everyone. I know you are well aware that we just commissioner's update at the series of regional meetings we had just recently, and I'm also aware that your time, you know, over the yesterday was a long day, and I know today you want to you know, try to stick within the time frame. So I'm going to keep my presentation really short. I have 4 points to make. First of all, there's a couple of resolutions that will be tabled or may have already been tabled. One is with respect to acknowledging the June 6, 2012 ratification of the Chinook Nagawin, and talking about creating a holiday for the Anishinaabe. This was mentioned in the regional meetings. It's a really an important historic day. The other types of National Aboriginal Days that's celebrated on June 21st and the Solidarity Day on September 30th, those are more right across the nation, but this is specific to the Anishinaabe Nation. But very importantly, from my perspective, this is a real legacy item to Shika Gordon Wandabents, who all of you are aware is in very ill health. And I think this is a testament to the great work that he's done and contributed to the Anishinaabe Nation for many years. The second resolution is a crucial resolution that not only talks about the present situation we're in terms of the government creating barriers, I call it, you know, with demanding thresholds for voting. You know, when you know, they've accepted there's so many different variations of how decision making is taking place, and the resolution that'll be talking about resolutions just wants to acknowledge the importance of the decision making of each and every one of the First Nations based on their processes. You know, this is what governance is all about. It's the governance of the First Nation making decisions. So it's kind of you know, I think an unnecessary blockage that the government is doing by trying to create, you know, thresholds. Their voting thresholds provincially and federally are just nonsense. So why they demand such high standards of us is beyond reason. So those are that point. Just an update as well. There's going to be a very important citizenship forum held on November 29th. I would ask all of you to tune in. This is an issue that's really becoming prevalent, particularly with the 8 ratifying First Nations, but it's going to be an issue for all First Nations, where the right to determine our own citizenship. You know, we've talked about this before, that the Indian Act registration system is genocide. So we need to really start taking care of our own people by taking on the responsibility to determine our own citizenship. Fred Belfield has done some great work on looking at models, which will be discussed at this forum. You know, and I won't get into detail on those for the sake of time, but important variation of what could possibly be some suggested ideas. Thirdly, recently we had a negotiation steering committee with the federal negotiators. And to his credit, Regional Grand Council Chief, Deputy Grand Council Chief Mel Hardy pressed the federal negotiator about explaining, you know, because we raised the issue of all these parallel processes that are going on to our governance agreement, whether it's a treaty initiative, Indian Lands Management Initiative, or Indian Lands Claim Initiative, or any other various form of parallel processes, such as the federal election reform, the work that they're talking about and doing at child well-being, you know, all mirror stuff that we've been working on. So Regional Deputy Grand Chief Hardy pressed the matter and said, you know, is this part of the same policy? Are they all these processes under the same policy? And the answer was yes. So that brings me to my last point, collaboration. You know, it's even more crucial that, you know, the spirit of Goodwill and Anishinaabe is incorporated here, because we're all one family. We're all after our same goals. We have different paths to get there. They're all equally important. But I think we need to share best practices and have collaboration, you know, wherever we can. Economies of scale, there's no sense, you know, there'd be several things worked on in terms of issues like citizenship or child well-being when we're all, you know, trying to, you know, attain certain goals on behalf of our citizens. So I think that's a very important element here is, you know, part of being, you know, one Anishinaabe family, and maintaining political affiliations and political advocacy and strength because of that political affiliation and advocacy is so crucial as we're going into it. You've been talking of a lot of issues here, very important issues, and you know, and all of those are going to require strong, unified advocacy. But if we're ever going to start, you know, making strides, and Chief Shining Turtle phrased it best, you know, we have to have strong governance behind each of these processes. So that's my message, as briefly as I can make it. I thank you for listening to me, and I'll pass it over to Jim Bob. And I'm open for any questions whenever you desire there, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any questions for Patrick before we moved on to the next agenda item?
Just a comment from Chief Shining Turtle. Pat, thank you for that that presentation. I wanted to mention this, going back to the foundations of governance. We have no problem going to Ottawa. We have no problem going to Toronto. Where do we go? Right? We fund, like the governments have funded themselves for their foundational governments. We walk those halls. We don't have that. We don't have the same footing as foundational government. They just don't fund it. But yeah, it's okay to watch. Look in the last 5 years, how much work have they done in Parliament Hill? To redo the roofs, to redo all of this stuff, to keep their foundational governments going. It's a small example, but they have no problem funding themselves for their governance. And then we get nickeled and dimed, and we argue about it. And it's fundamentally wrong. Just think when you go to all the, like, go to Queen's Park, go away up some of the streets on Bay Street, the Mowat building. That's all governance. And then how are we supposed to put together police reform? How are we supposed to, all these different things are in place when you stare at an abyss, there's nothing. I just think that's something that you just have to think about when you're looking, when we go negotiate. And then they have all the people in behind them, right? They have all the people taking notes. Often we've been at sessions where there's 3 or 4 of us. And they have armies of people ready there on their government. That's what I'm talking about. We don't have that. It's not there. Yet we stare at it every day, and it's okay for every other. Municipal governments have the same things. City of Sudbury, you look at your cities, they all have that. It's okay for them, and then we think about having our own foundational governance, it's suddenly a struggle.
Chief Shining Turtle is bang on in his assessment there. We have to be driving the bus instead of sitting at the back of the bus or getting run over by the bus. And that's why I talk about the necessary collaboration, political affiliation, political unity for advocacy, because he's very right. I remember him and I think might have been only 2, there might have been 1 other. We went to argue for increase in housing funding one time. We asked everybody to show up, and I think there was 2 or 3 of us there was the only ones that showed up. And that kind of stuff just doesn't work. We have to have strength in numbers on every one of these issues. So the chief has seen and witnessed a lot of this when he's been participating in some of these lobbying sessions or whatever, and the bodies just aren't there. Like that cartoon about my warriors are behind me. You look back and there's nobody there. So there's also the other cartoon character where the chief has got his son up on top of a high hill and he says, someday all this will not be ours. And that's what's going to happen if we don't start driving the bus.
Okay, we always need a Medalbyism, I think, to end things off. I remember when I used to write for Grand Council Chief a number of years back, he'd say, this is pretty good, but we have to add a couple of Medalbyisms in here. So anyway, okay, miigwech, Patrick, and I don't see any other hands up. So I'd like to turn it over to Jenny to introduce the next agenda item.
Thank you. Next, we'd like to invite Southeast Regional Deputy Grand Council Chief James Marsden and Gimakwe Rhonda Williams-Lovett from Moose Deer Point First Nation to provide an update from the Chiefs Committee on Governance. Over to you, please.
Miigwech there. I'm just seeing if you can hear me okay, Jenny. Ready? Thumbs up. Great. I'd just like to say also, we've been doing our updates for all the regional sessions the last month or so. So I'll just keep my comments brief. I'd just like to say miigwech to the Chiefs on the Chiefs Committee on Governance and our support staff that help us along. All the regional Deputy Grand Chiefs are invited to attend our sessions we have with the Chiefs Committee on Governance. So I'd just like to say miigwech for the Southwest Chiefs, Deputy Grand Chief Joe Muskokeman, and then Chief Jacqueline French, Chief Mark Peters. And from the Southeast, I have myself, and then there's Gimakwe Rhonda Williams-Lovett and Councillor Saga Williams. For Northern Superior, we have Deputy Grand Chief Mel Hardy, Gimakwe Patricia Tangi, and Deputy Chief Louis Kizawana, sorry. And from the Lake Huron region, we have Deputy Grand Chief Travis Busno and Chief Patsy Corbet, and we're still missing 1 chief from that region. So miigwech to the chiefs for all your input as we have our discussions on the governance. And then I'd just like to congratulate again the 8 First Nations that have ratified to date. And we're currently extending the ratification period. We were successful from September 21 to February 22 for those wishing to hold their first vote or their second vote. And I feel this this period should be left open just because, with the COVID-19 that hit on Canada, and then delayed lots of the businesses that we were trying to do. New leaders are catching up for their First Nations. So I've always we're always put on a schedule and deadlines by other governments, and I feel time should be left open for us to make so we can make a informed decision. And as Commissioner Patrick mentioned, we do have 2 resolutions that are tabled. And, I've been reading up on a little bit it's a history of the Rice Lake Indians by Mary Jane Muskrat Simpson. And there's a little essay that from Alderville by Alfred Simpson. We have Taylor on contract now for the Nishnabek Nation, looking at the residential school. Well, Alfred is his dad, but it's a quote. I don't know if he did the quote or he found it by because he has Mercury and Turpel. But it says in 1864, the descendants of the people who arrived here 500 years ago took upon themselves to forge a constitution without us. It became the British North American Act of 1867. In this act, the federal government gave itself the power, the power over Indians and lands reserved for the Indians. It did not ask us if we agreed. It just assumed power over our peoples. We are not even there when the decision was made. We must ask ourselves, by what right do they have the power, and how have they used it? These questions are critical to our future relationships with this nation. So again, we have that one resolution to honor our decision-making processes. It's about time. We do have a letter that's going to Prime Minister Trudeau, and it'll be now Minister Mark Miller. That's the question. They got to honor the way we make decisions for elections, ratification processes such as it now. We should have our time to make our decisions. So I just like to, I'm glad I said that little quote. It's just some history that happened to us. So, but the 8 First Nations that have ratified, they are forming a working group, which is now formed, and they're going to be looking at develop the structure and mandate of their collective body, and then the ratifying First Nations will review the federal legislation to ensure that the legislation conforms to the Nishnabek Nation governance. So, these 8 First Nations, they ratified, so now they're kind of setting the goals for the rest of us, how we're going to catch up, and they're moving ahead and continue with their process. So with that, I'll pass it over to Gimakwe Rhonda. Miigwech.
Miigwech, Jimbo. Inugajep Kenawea. So with your point was one of the very first to ratify our agreement, and we've been working very hard here to try and get some of the implementation work completed. So we've made moves to the development of potential input for laws, and we've struck committees that are responsible for taking that on within the community. Right now, we're moving into community consultation with our membership on and off reserve. But as part of the implementation working group that Jim Bob has mentioned to you, I just wanted to let everyone know that we have the governance commissioner who remains committed to this process. The restoration of jurisdiction department is standing there and helping us. We have legal counsel, and most recently we have Janet Esquima. She's the governance transition plan coordinator, who are the staff that are helping our community move forward on all of this. And then they're looking to provide communication support to the First Nations. So there'll be community engagement sessions that'll be virtual. There'll be promotional products that'll be developed with new messaging to the broader community to support and promote the success of the newly formed Anishinaabe government. And then we're looking at a ANJA website, and it's currently being developed, and it'll be updated with relevant incremental information according to new development during the implementation transitional phase. So for the ratifying communities, there's going to be the preparation of a work plan for the transition period, and that's what my community is going through right now. We're moving forward, and in March will be the end of our implementation period at this point. And then under the implementation working group, there's been the terms of reference that's been developed. And then there's the Niigaan Jamin, the Forward Together document. And I guess I just want to kind of elaborate a little bit on the citizenship conference that Commissioner spoke of on the 29th of November. And I guess I stress the importance of that because that's one of the things that Moose Deer Point had to look at seriously when we were in the committee format, where who was going to be our citizens. And there was a lot of discussion that within the community, and I know it's going to be a lot more discussion within the community at large, because for so long we've been told who our people can be and why they can't be ours and why they can't have status. So I just want to encourage everybody to, you know, try and set aside that date to be a part of that session. Because at the end of the day, you know, my committee here has looked at it from the point of view, those who belong to Moose Deer, whether you live off reserve, on reserve, that's the mentality and that we have to break away from, because Indian Affairs has made it so that, you know, not everybody is perceived as those who belong to our communities. So I just want to encourage you to set aside that date, and I don't want to take up too much time today. So we're here to support you as you move forward in your process. Be good.
Miigwech, Rhonda, for those important updates and work that the 8 communities are doing and pushing forward with their working group. I see Dave has his hand up, Jenny. Miigwech.
Yes, Dave, please. Dave Shawana.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Bonjour, we are in the additional cause, Moko Dodem, Ganabajin Donje. Miigwech for the update, Commissioner Madabi and Jim Bob, you know, on behalf of the Chiefs Committee on Governance, and certainly Gimakwe Williams Lovett in her work in her community, particularly with the transition work that, since her community has in fact, you know, ratified the agreement. There are a number of other communities, as Jim Bob has indicated. I see Arnia has put on the chat the link for the citizenship conference that we're planning to put together for November 26th, I believe, or sorry, 29th. And but I just want to give a slight update on some of the negotiations that are currently being undertaken, just to add to the briefing notes that are in the kits. We're now in a stage that we're sitting with Canada to discuss the implementation funding that is designated through the governance fiscal agreement. So those discussions, we're currently going to have some internal discussions on when in fact that funding could be released for those communities that ratify. We're also going to be having some discussions on, you know, Jim Bob, you talked about that period. You know, we've identified a extension of the voting period from September to February 2022. So I think what we need to do is sit with Canada to identify, is there an opportunity for communities to have an extension in that window to ratify the agreement. So that's the upcoming discussions that we'll be having internally, to go back to Canada to have that discussion on when we would consider, you know, how many communities would be ratifying the agreement, and is there an opportunity for communities beyond February 2022. So some important discussions coming forward, not only for the legislation exercise that would support this agreement, the governance agreement, but also to look at additional parties to the agreement. And this is where I think our commissioner, and as well as Jim Bob and others have in the past have said, we don't want to leave anybody behind. It's in fact an exercise that is to represent the family, Gudea, Wanagas, and Anishinaabe, all 39 family members or First Nations that could be party to this agreement. So I just wanted to provide that update. Those are some negotiations that we're working on upcoming for some funding regarding the implementation support for those communities. Now, Miigwech.
Miigwech, are there any further questions for the presenters? And if you are on the phone, I just wanted to remind you, you can press *9 to raise your hand to speak. Don't see any hands up. Thank you very much to our presenters, and I'll turn it over to Gary to introduce the next presentation.
Hey, Miigwech, Jenny. For the next presentation, the recognition of Anishinaabe Kishkat. And I'm pleased to introduce Barb Nolan, Language Commissioner, Southeast Regional Deputy Grand Council Chief James Marsden, Grand Council Chief Rich Niganobi, and Dave Shawana. So I'll turn it over to them now.
Okay, Miigwech, so I'm wondering if we were looking to have the resolution is part of the kits for presentation. We were hoping to have Barbara Nolan, our language commissioner, a part of the presentation this morning. But the resolution has since, you'll see that it actually has been translated into Anishinaabe. And as Patrick, our Commissioner Madabi, has indicated, the the recognition and the work of Gord Wendaban Sishikan over the years with respects to the support of the Chinook Nagewin being proclaimed in June 6, 2012. So the resolution is presented for today's discussions and approval. That it recognizes the chiefs and assembly that have ratified the Chinook Nagewin as of June 6, 2012, and the fact that the Chinook Nagewin has in fact been through ceremony has had a pipe ceremony to recognize the Chinook Nagewin. So those are my comments, and I know unfortunately we don't have Barbara Nolan to help go through the translation that has been provided for this resolution. We do have a mover and a seconder. We have Chief Andrew Ogoni from Shigwenda and Chief Irene Kells from Jabosing First Nation. So those are my opening comments. I don't know if Grand Chief or Jim Bobby, if you have some opening comments regarding this resolution. Miigwech.
Ani Buju, Kwinganishnikaz, Meswag Donjaban Nemedorum, Grand Council Chief Reg Niganabi, Anishinaabe Nation. I guess the only comments I have to this are it's always important to mark our dates and tell our stories. And we do have our stories that go across Turtle Island and across the Anishinaabe Nation. We do have our older stories and our older histories that we do tell ourselves, that we do share with our children, and we do share with our communities. But we must not forget that at that same time, we're also creating our history right now that will need to be shared and talked about later. As we continue to advance the Anishinaabe Nation, we can continue to advance our own communities. Stories like this could be important to share down in the future lines. So it would be helpful to commemorate such a date. Miigwech.
And Dave, I believe it was June 6, 2012, where the Chiefs and Assembly ratified the Chinook Nagewin for the Anishinaabe Nation. So that's why that June 6th date is very important, but I'm not sure if we do have a quorum to bring those resolutions forward. So yeah, so I'll pass it over to the co-chairs.
Yeah, and I know Miigwech, Jim Bob, and I know that's the chairs will note that regarding the quorum. And just out of respect, we had Donna Dabosigi also, her work and support with Shikant in the work over the years as part of the Quewa Council, but now I understand who is a part of the Getskajig Nation Council. So Donna, I just wanted to know if you wanted to provide some comments regarding the resolution as it's presented today, but I'm seeing that we might have issues with the quorum for it to be passed. But Donna, Pita.
Miigwech. Osho bebdik kwedangerin de gon Anishinaabe kwendao gigon do demawe. Shindaginim ne dom ne singbin jabawi kwan kongbin jaji. Kabuni genishin kadesh ndaga benje kubni gon. Mr. Jikwe bna jagi ma bna kwichke na shike. Pane ma bam shike kudo gas me na we Anishinaabe min. We skonit minge Anishinaabe when ich bin kenzung. Misha kina ye go tembak was na matzingi kidapane. Panege debatan kdo dem na ne kashe min jandisot niven ching ki shino magna eshe nakim gakmanda do dem na nik nakasing gego winak niging. Panege kdo gasmigna ensagi shakwi migwechang devenjet mandango doan yesa nishnabe pane we nagdoing. She came she kagi widibaman nitom net sing na get sinjin. Inad magyogi no we should be got ekmanda. Godoran giset nishnabe. Der min gises tashnai, godoson giset mitish. Mi pigi tapna ming manda nishnabe chinak nige when we machi minjan dising. Kim mi manda pi ensa der min gises godoson giset. Jikwe buntaing in the king. We que not doing nishnabe. Mibna tsopon gina kichuga dem on the chinak negewin. Gawi mamba game of she can kuda najana ge wepi kashik chinad marget ma pinish na big nation. Migwecha na dashma but she can ge kashik nad maging mina kashik kino maging. Migwech she can.
Miigwech, Donna. Yeah, just to confirm, the staff are watching the list of chiefs that have registered, and we don't have quorum yet. So we do have a couple of resolutions from yesterday. I think it was 3 from yesterday and be 1 from this morning. So if we do achieve quorum here in the next little bit, we'll get into the resolutions. Is there anything else on this particular presentation or any questions or comments? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands up. So we do have one more presentation prior to our break this morning. Support for Anishinaabe First Nation decision-making processes. And we have Southeast Regional Deputy Grand Council Chief James Marsden, Grand Council Chief Reg Niganabi, and Dave Shawana. And there is supposed to be a resolution, like I say, we'll be holding on to that till we get quorum. So I'll turn it over to the group.
Miigwech, Gary, for that. So the resolution that's part of the kits this morning, the second resolution is to, as Commissioner Madabi has indicated, exercise of the approval of various agreements that have been brought to citizens through the leadership in each of the communities. And we noticed some concerns about, especially during this time of the pandemic, when we've been isolated, unfortunately, in these little boxes, as we see on the screen. And it's been a challenge to have a very fruitful discussion with citizens on matters of importance, and particularly this the governance agreement, where we had some issues, and bringing that out in a virtual sense. So I guess there's been some concerns noted to us from the leadership, the GIMA, from the communities, that there needs to be some sort of support for that issue in the communities, as Jim Bob alluded to as well. So we do have a mover, we do have a seconder for the resolution. I know, I don't know if Grand Chief or Jim Bob would like to make any comments prior to maybe some opening comments from the mover and seconder on the resolution. Miigwech.
No, I don't have any comments at this time, Dave. Thank you.
Same with myself, Dave. It's an important resolution. We should, government should honor the way we make decisions for our First Nation.
Okay, Miigwech, Grand Chief, and Jim Bob Marsden for that. Is there any comments from the mover? I know we have Chief Rock from Wanapate First Nation and Gimakwe Williams Lovett from Moose Deer Point. So maybe we'll provide an opportunity for Chief Rock to make a few comments on the resolution.
Sure. Oni, everybody. Nice to see everybody again. Sorry for my bad internet connection here. But yeah, it's pretty well self-explanatory, and Patrick and Jim Bob both touched on this earlier. With it's up to us to make our own decisions here, not Canada, not Ontario. Some of us have our own constitutions. We have our own decision-making processes. Some of us even use First Nation customs to make decisions. We just don't want to be dictated by Canada or Ontario in any way. It just shows that when we make decisions, we go to our membership here, and those decisions are to Chief and Council come from those voices, and each First Nation has that right to do that. So other than that, we've been here for hundreds of years. Canada hasn't. So they tried to extinguish our society, our governance, our language, they even tried to extinguish us. So that's all stuff that we want to make our own decisions on, not anybody else. And so other than that, right now, that's all I'll have to say about it. Miigwech, thank you.
Miigwech, Chief Rock, Gimakwe Williams Lovett.
I guess I'm just, my community was one of the fortunate ones to have been able to ratify prior to the pandemic hitting. And that's the saving grace for us, I believe, because when you move towards virtual elders having to try to accommodate themselves on technical devices, I don't know necessarily that it would have gone so well for us in the first round. But having said that, it was because our people were well educated on the process, and it was our members that did the decision making for our community. So I can't stress the importance enough. I support the resolution on principle, that it should be our own people that are saying how we want to move our communities forward and how they want their leadership to act on their behalf. So I support this.
I see two hands up. See Patrick Madabi and then Northern Superior Deputy Grand Council Chief Melvin Hardy. So I think Patrick's hands up first.
I just wanted to make the point that there's no consistency across the country in how the government is requesting different types of decision making. And what really galls me really a lot is that they're entering into discussions with the Métis. And all they're requiring, as I understand from the Métis, is a resolution from their executive council of the Métis. They're not going to the people in that case. So that just shows you that the unfairness and inconsistency of what the government is asking various groups to do. So it particularly ticks me off when they can just get a resolution from the Métis leadership to move on governance issues, and they're going to be the ones that are going to occupy the field if we don't be very aggressive here on getting this type of resolution going and getting all our processes and collaboration and unified advocacy in place. And so I don't want to sound scary, but that's the reality out there. You got you.
Commissioner. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Deputy Grand Chief.
So, Jimmy Gwetch for that. I had a conversation with Fred, and Fred actually did a briefing note on this. So, Fred, I'm just wondering if you want to speak on the briefing note. Do you have it available?
Yeah, sure. Just to mention that there's a number of First Nations that have run different votes. As you know, we have everything we do with government, they need this ratification vote. And, I was just doing the past few days a program or a professional development program on cultural competence. And I thought, well, I'll do this because it's required by the Law Society. But, you know, what do I need to know? But actually, I learned quite a bit. And I learned how institutions, like government institutions, impose these things that are their cultural norms, not ours, and how we have to resist them and push back on them. But basically, there's a number of First Nations that have run ratification votes in response to this pandemic. They want to change the ways that they do things, as we always have adapted to our environment as Anishinaabe people, and you know, to survive and do good things. And this is what this resolution is about: is moving forward in a safe way and trying to make decisions as a nation in a way that is respectful to our needs and circumstances. Miigwech.
And then Gary, just to wrap that up there, the resolutions about legitimacy, showing respect for each First Nation's unique way of making decisions, thereby increasing legitimacy in the eyes of the nation's citizens, essentially so that they will feel that these documents have truly been approved, supported. This included the usage of traditional ceremony, safety, conducting nation activities in a way that's seen as safety in the midst of a deadly global pandemic. UNDRIP, Section 18 of UNDRIP, which is now supported by the federal law, states that Indigenous peoples have the right to participate in decision-making in matters which would affect rights in accordance with their own procedures and economy. First Nation citizens questions the use of resources on multiple votes, and the requirement for multiple votes can create a negative perception of existing leadership. Chimigoch.
Thank you very much, Northern Superior Deputy Grand Counsel Chief Melvin Hardy. Any other questions or comments, or anything else from the presenters to add? Dave?
Yeah, I know we provided an opportunity for the mover and seconder to speak on the resolution for the decision making. You know, I know that until such time that there is quorum, provide an opportunity for the mover and seconder to speak on the recognition of the Anishinaabe Kijigat. So I just wanted to note that, not that I left them out, but I just thought if we're not, the resolution is not put to the floor for decision making. We'd like to save that those presenters for when the resolution and there is quorum.
Miigwech, Dave. Seems like that wraps it up for this topic. That brings us to our health break for this morning. And I've got 10:49, so we'll say 10:50. So I'd like to have a 15-minute break because I'd like to introduce again Isidore Toulouse, be doing some language lessons during the break. They're very popular yesterday, so I'd like to give him this 15 minutes of time. So if we can reconvene at 11:05, and I'd like to invite Isidore to come back on now and provide us some more language lessons.
I understand from staff he'll be joining us just momentarily. Just please be patient, and we encourage you to stay on. Isidore will be here shortly.
Okay, Shay, do you want to put my slides in that we had yesterday? Here I am. Nanbena.
Absolutely. I will put those up in just a second here. Thank you for your patience here.
And I guess we can start off from the slides that we were finishing off yesterday. So next one, next one, next one, next one, and one more. One more. Oh, one more. I didn't realize we had that many. And one more, sorry. All right, here we go. Here's some good ones. All right. All right. Minokijeb Kinoya. Minokijeb. Good morning. Minokijeb. So here we have Jaya Winan. Jaya Winan. When we ask the question, Anisha Jiaid, Jaya in, how are you feeling? Anisha Jiaid. Get dim. I'm lazy. Get dim. Kitimna. Are you lazy? Kitimna. Deekos. I'm tired. Deekos. Gdeekosna. So notice how the G and the K are reflective in some of the same words, and the N reflects to me. Gitim. Deekos. Gdeekosna. Are you tired? Mbakade. Mbakade. I'm hungry. Gabakadena. Gabakadena. Are you hungry? Oh, Giki Mogosh. Giki Mogosh. Kiki Mogoshna. Kiki Mogoshna. Are you sleepy? Ndakus. Ndakus. I am sick. Gdakusna. Are you sick? Gdakusna. Ooh, and Bingech. Bingech. I'm cold. Gbingechna. Are you cold? Gbingechna. Other places I've heard use the word gigikachna. Gigikachna, meaning you're cold. Gigikachna. So, ngitim, ndeekos, mbakade, ngikimogosh, ndakos, mbingech. Another one that's not on there is ndeukwe. Ndeukwe. I have a headache. Ndeukwe. Ndeukwe. Ngaskanabagwe. I am thirsty. Ngaskanabagwe. Let me type those in for you, for those of you that. So, NDEWKWE. I have a headache. And Gaskanabagwe. I am thirsty. Gaskanabagwe. Gaskanabagwe. All right, let's move on to the next slide. Simple English. Here's some simple English words to remember. Anishinabemwin. So for the buggy swan, I introduced this yesterday. The buggy swan. The buggy swan. The buggy swan. Okay. Bony cushion. So pretend a cushion has bones in it. A bony cushion. A bony cushion. Bony cushion means leave me alone. Bony cushion. Okay. Bobby Ocean. Bobby Ocean. Bobby Ocean. Becca, wait for me. Bobby Ocean. Give me one. Give me one. Give me one. Give me one. It is raining. Those are just some simple words to remember your simple words by. The buggy swan, Bonnie Cushion, Bobby Ocean, give me one. Aha, I believe that concludes our slides. So let's go on to the next one, see if there's another. No, I believe that's it. So let's go to the beginning. All right, so go to the next one. All right, here's one that we've been doing every Monday with the staff at the UOI. Debenjgid gisan Anishinaaben a king, give it the one the god in it, Menidoadzuin. Shkode, Nebe, Eke, No Din. Give it was donan, we now do and the monk pi skokmigang. De benjit giminan get stoin dog and schnabin. One now don jen ninda nijwaswe kenomadwinan. Zagidwin, Debwewin, Nadenamowin, Mbwakawin, the Balendiswin, Gwekwadzuin, Minua, Akude Ewin. Kam Nadendana, Gabijuebok, Mino Nango Megwa, Ejuebok, Minua Giabe, Wane Juebok. All right, next slide. A simple prayer that I created quite a few years ago, just a simple repetition. Kijeb Anemewas, morning prayer, small morning prayer. Miigwech Gjemenedo, or you can use Debenjget, Miigwech Debenjget. Keen Kinegego Gajetuin, Keen Kinegego Gajetuin. Miigwech Mishomis Gizes, Gibe Waseajein Nungo. Miigwech Nokumis Debik Gizes, Gibe Waseajein Nidbikug. Miigwech Skakmikwe, Gimi Jiang Vamodzuin, Gimi Jiang Mi Jim, Gimi Jiang Bish, Gimi Jiang Wesiang, Minua, Gimi Jiang Nesewin. Sema Nbagdina, Giwednung, Wabnung, Jaunung, Minua Eppingishmug. Nadmo Shin, Jim Skugabuya, Minua, Jizong de Eya. Miigwech Gjemenedo. All right, next slide. Kchitwa Kidwinan, Njissa Gidinen Mowin. Good words for the mind. Chitwa Kidwinan, Njissa Gidinen Mowin. Nagnoam dan. Nagnoam dan da. Gibimad Ziwinina. Nagnoab Nanda, Gibimad Ziwinina. Mnadapnan Kinagegu Ejwe Baknangwa. Minadapnan Kinagegu Ejwe Baknangwa. Mnadapnan. Go back, we're not done there yet. Go back. Wewene gnosh, quijibemadis. Wewene gnosh, quijibemadis. Speak to your fellow being in a good way. Wewene gnosh, quijibemadis. Gegwa mjigigidoke. Gegwa mjigigidoke. Don't speak harshly. Don't speak angrily. Angrily, is that a word? Kina zagidida. Kina zagidida. Kina zagidida. Yes, and I can answer any questions as we're going along here. So whoever had that question, Chief and Council are beginning to include in Shabbos Council meetings. I'm wondering if you have any suggestions or phrases or words that can be used in the meeting, such as I agree, I don't agree, I support it, all in favor, etc. I can provide that list for you. I can do that and send you a list. All right. All right. Very good. And that is my Zoom class every day. All right, Rama First Nation. All right, so Kina Zagidida. Let's all love one another. Kina Zagidida. All right, next slide. Here we have those 7 grandfather teachings. Zagidwin, Debuewin, Mnadendemowin, Mbwakawin, Debadendiswin, Gwekwadzuin, Akudeewin. Akudeewin. All right, next slide, please. Shkitten Queshkadadwin. Shkitten Queshkadadwin. Anytime you see that S-H-K-I, shke, it refers to something new. Shke. Shkin Queshkadadwin. Shke, skin up Kawagan, a new tie. Skin up Kawagan. Shkibabagoyan, a new shirt. Shkibabagoyan. Okay. Shki. Shkidaban, a new car. Shkidaban. So Shkin Queshkadadwin, a new greeting or a new meaning, a new meeting. So Ani Bojo, Isidore Toulouse Indigenakas, Wikwem Kung Dunjba, Suttons Bay Ndida. Ndida means I live at Ndida, but I come from Wikwemkong. Ndida. Mushkin Ndonishnabem. Mushkin. I speak fluent Anishinabemwin. Mushkin Ndonishnabem. Abish Enginukian. Abish Enginukian. Where do you work? Abish Enginukian. Wenesh Ejnukazian. What is your name? Wenesh Ejnukazian. Apish Enjabayan. Apish Enjabayan. Where do you come from? Apish. Abish. Apish. Again, in most cases, there's dialect variances everywhere. Walpole Island, Curve Lake, Rama, Northern Ontario, Thunder Bay, Manitoulin Island. All of these variances of our dialects change every 10 years because of the different changes within the communities. These dialects are really, really easily transferable to any other community that you go to. So as a fluent speaker, I can attune my speaking ability to reflect the Thunder Bay area, to the people of Curve Lake and Walpole Island, all of those other areas. So it's all the same language. All right. So we shouldn't be criticizing one another as to, oh, that's not how you say it. That's not how you say it. That's a big no-no. We should try to be encouraging one another to speak as much of the language as we can. And I like those comments that you put in there that you're trying to use it a lot more within your First Nation communities band council meetings. Wenish enendang, meaning who agrees. Wenish enendang, wenish edebwe endang, who agrees. All right, who believes in this? Wenish edebwe endang. Kenam bin kenik, kenam bin kenik. Everyone, raise your hand. Bin kenik, bin kenik, bi. That bi comes from lifting. Binan, bin kenin. Okay, bin kenin. All right, next slide. Just cut in here anytime, Gary, if it's time to quit.
Perfect timing, Isidore. You must have
All
been,
right.
we're
You
right on
bet.
time. Thank you very much. And as you'll see in the chat, we have had numerous requests and some links have been shared for your daily classes. And as well, there's been some questions directly to you, and we understand that you'll follow up with that. Miigwech.
All right.
Miigwech, I hope everyone had a good break and we learned a lot from Isidore, as always. So we are very blessed to have him with us. I would like to now introduce our next presentation, and this will be an update on residential schools, and we will be hearing from Lake Huron Regional Deputy Grand Council Chief Travis Buzino.
Good morning again. So I just wanted to provide a bit of an update on some of the work I've been doing. And I've asked Chief Bazoun if he can join me if he's still here after my opening. So essentially, you know, since the findings back in May of the 215 unmarked graves out west, There's, you know, obviously it sparked a conversation across the country, and there's a lot of good, well, there's a lot of work being done across the country. So as I kind of followed along and monitored, you know, the conversation stayed steady, you know, up to, you know, Canada Day. There was, you know, lowered flags and not my Canada, you know, or everybody's wearing orange, as I am today, and I try to do frequently. And then, you know, the conversation, you know, continued, you know, until September 30th. And since then, you know, while there's kind of, you know, a conversation here and there, the conversation isn't as loud and as strong. And the conversation isn't over. The work isn't over. So, you know, with the support of, you know, our executive team and the leadership council, you know, my intention is to share the Anishinaabeg story. And I don't have a concise story as of yet. I will look to the leadership for guidance. But essentially, I would say come September, you know, I've found some, or we found some resources internally where I can, you know, work with the multimedia team, as well as a researcher who does work with the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation as a researcher. So we have access, I wouldn't say to the National Center, you know, their complete database, but he is a researcher by trade, and he's from Alderville. You know, I think where I've been struggling, and that problem is being solved as we speak, is having internal resources to really just to keep me coordinated. As you can see by this past day and a half, there's a lot of work that we must do on a lot of fronts, and trying to strengthen, or at least not strengthen, but you know, get the internal supports to help guide the work. It is going to be an important task. I don't anticipate this being a rush job. I think we have a long road ahead of us. And really, the Anishinaabeg story, you know, is multifaceted. There's, you know, there's survivors, you know, that may be willing to share their story, and within sharing their story, you know, my intention would be to ask them, you know, what advice, you know, can you give to the younger generations to acknowledge, you know, your own family surroundings, your own lifestyle, you know, your extended families, the circles you walk in, you know. And then when I met with the youth council last week, I asked them if they'd be willing to help with the work. And I think being a youth, being you know, young people, you know, we have to start this journey earlier in life, and I always use myself as an example. You know, it took me a bit to learn certain things about the way life is, and what's normalized and what shouldn't be normalized. So I, you know, personally, it's a journey for me, and I think it's a journey that a lot of us have to take. In a good way, with the right supports, and with the right education. The idea behind this work, you know, while we need to educate the general Canadian public, and which I intend to do, which you know, we can do through social media, through you know, developing you know, an offshoot of our website within Anishinaabeg, you know, interactive maps, et cetera. But it's also important that, as I was saying earlier, we educate ourselves. I've heard from numerous people that, you know, people, I'll use my conversation with Chief Collins as an example. Last night, I called him because he's aware of the work that I intend to do. And I basically, you know, he's I think what the province and the feds call a caretaker. So he's a Fort William First Nation is the caretaker community for the residential school that was here in Thunder Bay. And he himself admitted he's on a journey as well, you know, in a good way, to understand residential schools, to understand the effects it has had within our families and within our communities. And I'd, you know, as a part of the overall work, you know, I want to do interviews with, you know, chiefs like Peter Collins, and Chief Andy Rickard and Chief Bazoun, just really to incorporate, you know, and educate on the work that they will embark on. I take the words from Chief Collins very seriously. He said, you know what, they are taking their time in Fort William First Nation. There is a lot of work to do, and they do not want to rush it. And they will, you know, they have one shot. I think we all have one shot at this, and it has to be done right. You know, an elder used to say all the time, you know, if you're going to build it right. And there's a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of different angles to take in this work, and it's important work, you know, to educate ourselves on the Anishinaabe story. In saying that, I have I've been grateful. I've been working with Garden River and Serpent River on the residential school work that is being undertaken by them as well. And you know, I look forward to the journey ahead. Some of this work started, and kind of, you know, the inspiration, not just from what's going on around the country, but also when I was elected in this position in June, a friend of mine reached out to me. He lives here in Thunder Bay, and he basically told me that there's an unmarked grave at one of the cemeteries of a young girl who passed away in 1910 at the residential school here, and I believe she was 10 years old. Her name was Emma Laford. So she was a member of Garden River. She had a sister who attended as well, and her sister didn't even know that her sister passed. So during this conversation, I went and met with him at the graveyard, and he was just telling me, you know, he did some research back in 2013, and it kind of fell on deaf ears. I shouldn't say it, but he did reach out to some people, and they didn't advance the work, and maybe, you know, maybe the timing wasn't right. And then throughout this journey with him, I was in touch with several people, and one of them was Tanya Talaga. And she's doing some work as well. She's also been out west, you know, and for those of you who know her, she's you know, a prominent author who's done some really good work for First Nations as a First Nation. And it turns out, you know, I was out doing land-based activities, otherwise known as golfing, and my phone rang, and it was Tanya, and she told me that there was a lady from Batchewana, and her name's Carol Hermertson. She's a descendant of Emma, and she's been trying to find Emma. Emma would have been her great aunt. That's her grandma's sister, and somehow she found us. So we ended up talking later on that night. I spoke to Carol, and I helped her. Well, I was a part of a team helping her really just understand what happened. And there's so much to the story that I will not even try to explain. But at the end of it all, I joined her in a ceremony here in Thunder Bay, and she basically, she grabbed some of the earth. We did a ceremony. I had my niece join me. We had a drummer, and we did a couple songs, and we had some jingle dress dancers, and we did a bit of a ceremony, and then she went back home, and she brought that soil home, and then she did a ceremony in Garden River where her grandma was laid to rest. So it's stories like these that are real and that have happened all across our nation, and these stories have to be told. They have to be shared. People need to understand just what occurred at the schools. My hope in doing the sharing and the storytelling is to try and do it, and there's no other way. I haven't found no other way to say this, but to try and do it in a good way, in a way that educates people, in a way that opens people's eyes, and in a way that provides an opportunity for people to heal, for people to potentially go on their own journeys. So it's I think it's a priority for me, being someone raised in a family of Indian day schools, aunts and such that went to residential school, and growing up in an environment that probably could have used some improvement, although I'm extremely proud of my parents, and I grew up in a good home, but I do acknowledge what was normalized that probably shouldn't have been, and a lot of these well-known facts, well-known situations that enter families that are intergenerational have occurred in a lot of our families, including mine. So I feel I know there's a mandate already for the organization to do some work, and I'm hoping I do acknowledge the organization again, Marcia and staff, and I acknowledge our executive team and the leadership council for supporting this work, and I look forward to seeking advice from our leadership in the work ahead. Again, it is a long road, but we do have a story to tell. We have a story to share, and we have a journey to embark on in a good way. So with that, is Chief Zion available?
Hello.
Hello, my friend.
Hello. Yeah, so I can give a quick update, I guess, on some of the work that's being done here in Serpent River. Hi, everybody. So Ani Bojo, Chief Brent Pazan, noted in any addition to cause, Mayin Dodem, Ganabajing and Donjaba. Hello, it's nice to be here. So a little bit of an update. Serpent River, along with Mississauga First Nation and Sagamuk, Anishinaabe, are working together as 3 communities to jointly kind of oversee the residential school project. So much like many other communities in the area, we're taking it on a slower approach to ensure that we're not missing anything, but also that we're providing supports and tools to our communities as they're going through a lot of this work and kind of going through the discovery process. And so we're working with the federal and provincial governments right now on our proposal that will hopefully include some healing programs and mental health supports, but also looking at the residential school sites themselves. So originally we had met about 3-4 months ago in ceremony several times over the past 3-4 months to kind of discuss the schools, and I've had many chiefs reach out, and I'm really thankful for that. So I had some chiefs reach out and discuss their willingness to help out and support us through this process, because I know many people, many other communities went to Serpent River. I think the last time we checked, there were communities as far out to Manitoba, and also like the Northern Creek communities in Quebec. So there's quite a broad spectrum of communities and area that the Spanish schools brought there, and then also the history of the schools themselves being started in Wikwemekong and being moved to the Spanish area after a few years. So there's a lot of moving pieces, but the three communities are kind of working together using a tripart agreement that was in place prior to for other things, and so we're kind of polishing off that agreement and doing it all under here. So there's a new chief at Mississauga, and then I just recently got reelected, so it's kind of there's some pause as we're kind of moving around. Thank you, Megan. And so we're just taking stock, and hopefully we'll be able to update the Mississauga chief on what's been happening, and also making an announcement soon to the other communities on how they can be a part of this, because we don't want to exclude anybody. And that's been one of the things for taking it really slow, is to ensure that we understand what we're looking at, what the sites are looking at, but also making sure that we can take stock of all of the other communities that are involved and not leaving anybody out. And I think that's something that is really important. I've heard from other chiefs, right, is to ensure that not everybody's left out. And so, we're working on bringing on the survivors, we're working on bringing on our other communities, and then we're going to work on bringing on all of the other outside communities also, so that everybody's involved in this process, but recognizing that this is going to be a multi-year process. The Anishinaabe Nation has given great support, so I've really appreciated Travis and the Grand Chief's work in this, organizing meetings for us, and just providing that soundboard. So I do really appreciate that. And other chiefs who are kind of dealing with similar issues, it's been really great to talk to. I guess the one issue that I hope isn't going to become a broader issue into the future is that the provinces and the federal government say they're going to work together. And some of the comments have been very much, the province has been like, oh, well, go deal with that with the feds. And it's like, well, no, you said that you were going to do this. So it's kind of holding them to account as time goes on. Some of their words are changing. And also the Spanish school sites as technically two separate schools. We have an all girls school and all boys school, but it's considered one school. So I'm working on seeing if we can get the funding expanded to include both sites. And then as we're engaging even our non-Indigenous communities, they're coming up with stories. And so we've heard of stories of the children spending the summers on the islands out in the channel. So now, it comes up is, do we have to search the islands? And, what does that involve? And do we have to search the rivers and all of these things? And so anybody who's doing this, this process leads to more questions than answers in a lot of ways. And I think that's why I'm really thankful that the other chiefs and the other communities have given us the time and space to do this work, because every time we meet, it's bringing up more and more questions around the work that needs to get done and where potential sites are and things like that. So that's a small update from the Spanish school sites. And again, we're taking it slow. We're making sure we're including everybody, and communities who sent who got their children sent here, you will definitely get reached out and coordinated through. Hopefully, a coordinator is going to come on board soon and help the communities organize this process. But we're still moving ahead. It's taking a little bit, but we will be investigating the Spanish sites, and I believe the proposal is just in its finishing days. Thankfully, Chief Rickard sent me a very helpful person, and they're just reviewing and filling in a lot of the gaps, which I have forgotten. So I'm super thankful for that contact. But if there's any questions, I'm more than willing to chat. And I can share my email down in the chat section there, or you can get it from Travis. But I'm more than willing to chat. And if you know your community sent students to Serpent River, please reach out for sure, just so that I can start a list to make it a little easier when we start doing some of the broader investigations. But it's a great collaboration between the three communities, and we've been working really closely on it. And I'm thankful that they've entrusted Serpent River to kind of lead this process. But it's a definitely it's going to be a long-term thing. But thank you. I'm going to keep rambling. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for sharing some of the work that you've been doing. I wanted to also add, in speaking with Chief Collins last night, he actually recommended, and I support this, communities that what they're calling caretaker communities. So communities like Sagamok, Serpent and Mississauga, Garden River, Fort William First Nation. He's recommending that we find a way to get together more often. A way, and it doesn't have to be anything formal. It's more of how do we get together and share kind of what's being done at each site, so that there could be something that one site's doing that maybe another site isn't, just best practices and sorts. So I think what I can commit to is finding a structure for us to get together, and just move along collectively, right?
Miguel, before we open for any questions or comments, I'd like to just remind everyone that we are live streaming. We do appreciate that this is a very sensitive and traumatic topic for many, and for almost every one of our First Nations has been touched by this. And those individuals and their families, we're still dealing with those effects. So I just want to remind everyone that this is being live streamed, and we do appreciate the update. It's very important, and very, very, very much something that our communities live with every day. And I see we have Gima Nut.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for that update. And I just wanted to share with the chiefs here that I'm going to be supporting Serpent River, and congratulations, Gamal Brent, on your re-election, and supporting Garden River, and also Six Nations. So Atikmikshing is right now, we're just trying to figure out where all of our children were sent out to, and offer our support to those caretaker nations, and also to indicate that we want to participate in the process. And because we feel that there's some nations that are some caretaker nations that are moving faster than others, and so we do have some concerns. We're still not fully prepared ourselves yet. We decided to start things in ceremony, which we did on September 30th, and we still have some other follow-up ceremonies to do, as well as hiring someone specific to start doing our own research and basically affirming where all of our children went to, and if they all made it back home. So I just wanted to say that to other leadership, that I know Chief Rickard too was sharing that he had some concerns too about the manner in which Algoma University was pursuing the investigations in that area. And so I think it's prudent that leadership support Gama Bissayon and his community, and Chief Rickard and the other caretaker nations, because in some cases the government is moving ahead without their engagement or consent. And so I think getting support to them is very important at this time. Miigwech.
Miigwech. Are there any other comments or questions that anyone has for the presenters? And again, if you're on the phone, please press *9 to raise your hand, and then we would ask you to unmute. I'm not seeing any further questions. Are there any further comments that Regional Deputy Grand Council Chief or Gima would like to make?
No, you're good. Okay. So I just wanted to add, even as a political advocacy body, I do want to start making some noise, if you will, or just putting out statements and such. I think one of the more recent ones, I wouldn't say we missed the boat, but with the Pope potentially committing to coming to Canada to offer an apology. I've been working with our staff to see what kind of statement we could put out. I would not necessarily acknowledging that that's what he wants to do, but what would an apology look like, right? Saying I'm sorry isn't enough, for a kid who made a mistake. So it shouldn't be enough for a Pope whose institution made grave mistakes. So I think from a political perspective, we do want to start getting more active and more vocal on on the current issues or things like that come up.
Chimigwech. I would now ask Gary to introduce our next speakers.
Okay, miigwech, miigwech, Jenny. Okay, next item we have on the agenda is the Mungdo Dem, the Loon Clan, Intergovernmental Affairs and Aboriginal Treaty Rights. And I'd like to introduce at this point Southwest Regional Deputy Grand Council Chief Joe Muskokeman, Northern Superior Regional Deputy Grand Council Chief Melvin Hardy, and Alan Dokis, Policy and Communications Director. So I'll turn it over to that group.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I go on, I'd like to thank Travis and Chief for their presentation. Very moving. What we're bringing to the council today is the issue of a housing update, and so I think it's one of these issues that all fall into the same kind of category as Chief Shining Turtle had been talking about for some time, about a legacy issue. It's been no surprise that we've been struggling with poor housing, inadequate housing, as our population continues to grow and forces many of our people out of the community and to seek shelter and seek other housing accommodations within urban settings. And we all know the issues that form from there without going through them all. But this is an update that we would want to bring forward because it's being dealt with on many levels. There's been a new announcement by the Prime Minister, for those that have been following, that they're looking towards having affordable housing, and what would that mean for Canada? But more importantly, from our lens, is what does it mean for First Nation people and First Nations across this country? And I think it's one of those things that would we really need if our own, from the Anishinaabe perspective, is our own plan. We would like to be able to put forward that plan to support our representatives that are going to the Chiefs of Ontario and support our representatives that are going to the Assembly of First Nations, so that we have a clear and consistent message what is coming forward from the Anishinaabe people, and that we would have a way of quantifying and even having, if possible, data. But what is important for us is that we need to have the internal capacity in order to be able to build that plan and put that plan forward. Currently, within the structure of the organization, we do not have anyone within the housing or is a housing specialist, and so essentially we had started a plan, It had gotten to a certain point and a certain level, and then it was abandoned for other processes. We would like to go back and pick that up and begin to establish what that plan would look like in order to support our other representatives. So with that, Chair, I'd like to turn it over to Aldo Keese for the explanation. Then we'll go through the housing update fairly quickly, given the time that we have and where we are on the agenda and the time remaining. So with your consent, Chair, I turn it over to Aldo Keese for his presentation.
Sure, you have my consent there, Regional Deputy Grand Council Chief.
Miigwech, Gary, I was a little concerned there when he was looking for you to confirm that I could speak. We have a long history, Gary and I, so he knows I can ramble on. All joking aside, thanks for that, Regional Deputy Grand Council Chief Muskogeman. So, you know, just to sort of go back from, you know, what Regional Deputy is sort of putting out as sort of our path forward is I'll just run through a few key points about sort of where we sort of came from just over the last sort of 5 to 6 years, and where we're at right now. And then also I know Northern Superior Regional Deputy Grand Council Chief Hardy's also going to speak on this a little bit as well. So with that, going back to 2016 at Anishinaabeg Nation Special Chiefs Assembly in Rama First Nation, there was an approach to housing brought forward, and it was reinforced by, or I guess mandated by resolution. And there were 3 main or primary aspects to that. And I think you'll see the connections to what Regional Deputy Muskogeman was speaking to. The first being First Nation self-administration, the people, the processes to effectively plan, manage, and deliver in real time. Second, First Nation self-determination, the forward-looking process of making decisions beyond the current time frame. And third, First Nation self-governance, the ability to negotiate and create partnerships with other levels of government and other private and public entities. So, like I said, that mandate was secured at that Special Chiefs Assembly, and about in around a year or so later, at the time I was at the Chiefs of Ontario, came back, worked with Kevin Restool, and then picked up the work with Sarah Gammon, who's now within our Human Resource Department, and we did a couple of primary things. One was develop a phased approach to reinforce the vision for this Anishinaabeg Nation housing strategy. Set up a Anishinaabeg Nation Chiefs Committee to do some work to guide that work. So we entered in and completed our phase 1 work. Now, I won't dive too far into this, but obviously we run into challenges when we get to sort of Ontario level, working with the federal and provincial or federal government specifically, and then rolling that up, our work into AFN level work and the work that was going on there. What was clear, and Regional Deputy Hardy was chief at the time. You know, we had a lot of discussion around, you know, we're all knocking on our community's doors asking for information and data, and it was getting confusing. So at the 2019 Grand Council Assembly, Georgina Island, that original mandate was rescinded, and basically we were directed to provide technical support to the Anishinaabe Nation leadership who were participating at the Chiefs of Ontario Chiefs Committee on Housing and Infrastructure. So that's been going on since. Regional Deputy Hardy is still working there as well, and I attend those meetings. And there's been a number of sessions over the last several months from the Chiefs of Ontario, by the Chiefs of Ontario. Some really good information. So that's been going on. But like as Regional Deputy Muskogeman is saying, you know, I think it's time we need to revisit that, you know, original mandate to develop that Anishinaabeg Nation strategy for housing and infrastructure. Look at how we prepare ourselves to effectively participate in whatever table or process or opportunity that our Anishinaabe Nation First Nations would like us to advocate on their behalf. So that's sort of the essence of where we're at now. And I think that's essentially the main points I want to make. And also just one more, again, going back and stressing, I'm not a housing expert, but we're doing our best. But there's a need to move forward with the identification of what type of housing expert we need, develop that plan to make sure we're not, and I'm aware of avoiding duplication, avoiding knocking on communities' doors about asking for the same information time and time again, and then mapping out that plan. Doesn't mean I can't assist with that, but I think we need to find out what kind of housing and infrastructure expertise do we need in the organization to help move this forward. So I'll leave my comments at that and turn it back to the chair and possibly hear from Regional Deputy Grand Council Chief Hardy. Miigwech.
Jimmy Gwetch for that. Deputy Grand Chief Joe Muskokaman and Al. I'm going to forego any input into this, but what I'm going to do is actually put a rights holder on the table. I'm going to have I've spoken to Chief Sharrington, him and I have been having discussions with regard to that. So I want to ask if he can speak on this, and then I'll just say a few comments right after. Jimmy Gwetch.
Thank you, Mel. This whole housing issue is indeed a legacy issue that needs our addressing in sort of two areas. There was the old Indian housing program that never worked, and we really struggled as bands with that. Then the onset of the CMHC program. Now, the National Housing Strategy was announced by the Trudeau government as a $40 billion investment initially in 2017. In 2019, the National Housing Strategy Act became part of this equation, and housing was now a human right, the right to adequate housing. We fit that bill pretty easy. Then they came the Canadian Housing Benefit, CHB, which announced $2 billion to match provinces, and the province of Ontario committed $1.5 billion for that initiative. So what I've learned is the existing initiative now exceeds $70 billion, the National Housing Strategy. And we have seen reports across the country that I'll cite here that cities are getting access to this money. Two that I'm speaking to here is the city of Hamilton received $194 million in investments for a massive affordable housing facelift. What is that massive affordable housing facelift? Social housing. I just downloaded this morning the City of Toronto's report of action, confidential agreement or document that they had internal that was made public. That in 2019, the federal government announced a $1.34 billion fund over 9 years for National Housing Co-Investment Fund to repair the social and aged housing in the City of Toronto. Huge investments. So the opportunity exists. What I wanted to say was this: there was an opportunity, there's a couple of pieces here. The last memorandum to cabinet goes back quite a ways on housing, and it deals only with that new program, First Nation market-based housing. That was brought in by the Conservative government. Nothing's been done on that. So there was a massive push by the AFN. I worked on that, trying to get a new memorandum to cabinet. And there was a window where there was an audience for that by the cabinet to have a new MC. But of course that broke down nationally, and I'm not going to go into any further than that. The other one though was, so when that memorandum, the cabinet process was breaking down, different groups were doing different things across the country. We went as the Chiefs of Ontario and spoke to the Deputy Minister, and he invited us to a meeting in Ottawa to talk specifically about housing and infrastructure. And we had a terrific meeting to open the doors, and that was chaired by then former Chief Ava Hill. We had R. Don Maracle attend. I attended the meeting. We invited chiefs from Ontario. There was the 3 that showed up. We came back and we reported this as another at a Chiefs of Ontario meeting. And sadly, we never got any documentation together. So I would say there are windows there, and it requires us to have a plan. The other opportunity for us is that we have to define the legacy of this matter. What I've seen in these reports is the cities are not going together. I don't see in here that the city of Hamilton worked with the city of Toronto and worked with the city of Ottawa. Why are we forced to do the same thing? It doesn't make sense. I think as the Anishinaabe Nation, what we do is we develop our own plan, we take it in and says, you didn't do that to the city of Toronto, you didn't do that to the city of Vancouver, you didn't do that to the city of Hamilton. Why do we have to get dragged into a process because another region isn't ready? We're ready to talk about housing, and we're ready to do even more. We're ready to build houses, we're ready to repair houses, because our people deserve better. And we know better, so we should do better. Full stop. Thank you for listening.
Jimmy Glitch, Chief Shannon Turtle. So just to top it off, and maybe Al might want to tie a bow tie on it. I sat on the Chiefs Committee on housing and infrastructure. That's what they call it now. And the concern was that they asked what the strategies of the PTOs is. In the discussion with Al and with Kevin, they talked about the strategy. Anishinaabe Nation did start a process like that. So, and I just want to echo what all the participants on this call said about this topic, is we need to revamp back to Anishinaabe Nation. We need to get our own strategy together, and we need to work on it ourselves. As the Chiefs of Ontario, as much as the work that they're doing, it's getting bogged down. And then our First Nations still need adequate housing and its supplies, considering that even during COVID, the prices has raised almost 30% at some points. So with that, I want to say Chimmy Gutch, and Al, I don't know if you want to put a bow tie on it. Other than that, I appreciate the time for listening.
Thanks for that, Regional Deputy. And thanks, Ogama Shiny Turtle, for that. And, I think in the brief notes sort of talk about next steps, and really is, a couple of things. There's operational stuff like Southwest Regional Deputy Grand Council Chief Muskokan was talking about, bringing that capacity and expertise. That doesn't mean we slow down. We have a host of information from what we were doing based off that 2016 mandate to look at that strategy. That there's really good information there that Sarah Gammon helped put together. We have terms of reference for our committee. We can make some minor adjustments to that, package that up, share it to the leader, share it as an update to the leadership, and then look at, it's important that we involve, on a regional basis. You see that in other sectors for the Anishinaabe Nation, making sure that there's a voice there, but also being accountable back to the chiefs, either through regional meetings or the assembly. So we can start that work. We don't have to sort of say, well, we have to wait till we hire someone, and there's all kinds of processes to go through there. We can sort of do these things concurrently, put that information together, work with our regional deputy Grand Council chiefs on this, work with other departments. I think it's been made abundantly clear to me that there are those connections into our social development area, child well-being, in addition to social development generally, also into areas of infrastructure, not just electrification, et cetera, and clean water, but also, we're starting to hear discussions about broadband and connectivity. And, those are all important elements of building strong housing in your community. So that's where I'll leave my comments. I don't know, Deputy Joe, if you have anything to add before we close off, but that's my update for now. Miigwech.
Yes, thank you very much, Al. Thank you, Regional Chief Hardy and Chief Shining Turtle for your input. Yes, I'm glad you emphasized that at the end, because it is not just about building boxes. It's also about the necessary infrastructure that is going to be required, including additions to reserve for many First Nations. So we can't leave that out. So it's going to be a multifaceted plan that needs to be put in place, and including technological infrastructure with that. So I'll turn it back to you, Chair, with that presentation. Miigwech.
Hey, Miigwech, Deputy Grand Council Chief Joel Muskogman. I just noticed you forgot to ask for my consent for Deputy Grand Chief Melvin Hardy to speak. Anyway.
Nothing can stop him.
Yeah. Okay, Miigwech team for that update. And I'll move on before Deputy Grand Council Chief Hardy comes back on here. The next item is the Chiefs of Ontario Heritage and Burials Elders Advisory Committee. And we're going to call on Ogama Jason Henry, Chippewas, Kettle and Stony Point First Nation, and Kevin Restool, Government Relations Coordinator. Ogama Henry, you're.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Go ahead, Ogama.
Was my hand raised? I wasn't paying attention. I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah. Heritage and Burials, or Heritage and Burials Elders Advisory Committee. I have you down as one of the presenters.
Yes, it's Kevin Restool here. Hi. Yes, this was just wasn't really planned as a presentation. It was more just the resolution to put forward. In the interest of time, I'm okay to skip it. However, I will defer to Ogama Henry if he prefers. Like I say, I didn't have a presentation per se prepared, but I do have information that I can go over for folks if there's an appetite for that. But I'll again, like I say, in the interest of time, I will defer to Ogama Henry on that one.
Yeah, sorry, I'm familiar now that we're talking about. So there was a need for appointment to the Chiefs of Ontario Burials and Culture Working Group. There was two names put forward by the Leadership Council. One was Mike Henry from Kettle and Stony Point, and that was based on his previous work with AN and with Brandy George, who works with COO on burials. So, and the other one was from North Shore somewhere, correct, Kevin?
Sorry. Yeah, no, I'm not aware of this second name. Perhaps Nikki can help with that. I was aware that Mike Henry, his name was put forward, and that's why I had you as the mover of the resolution. And
Okay.
and what I had planned was giving just a quick little overview of the Chiefs of Ontario group, and perhaps hoping that you could speak to the wisdom and experience that Elder Mike Henry would bring to that advisory committee.
Sure. Yep. Okay. Well, go ahead then. You can do your presentation, and I'll follow up. Miigwech.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll try and keep it brief. What I will do is I will share. I'm not sure. I've got a couple of documents that were in the kits, and they were also provided at the regional meetings. Let me just share that on screen. Can everybody see that? It's the Chiefs of Ontario First Nations Burial and Heritage Sites Advisory Committee draft terms of reference. Now, I'm just going to quickly just go over it, just highlight some key points in this document here. So I'm going to just scroll down here. So the authority what it does is it derives its authority from Special Chiefs of Assembly Resolution 1234, which is the other document that I will reference. I'll go over in a few minutes. Just continue on here. So the purpose and scope. The fundamental role is to receive direction from First Nations political leadership and to advise and support First Nations on policy, procedures, and processes on issues related to heritage and burials priority area. With regards to the composition and structure, the advisory committee, the membership is made up of representative of elders, knowledge keepers, technical support from the Chiefs of Ontario, political territorial organizations, Grand Council Treaty 3, the Independent First Nations, and Six Nations of the Grand River. Previously, this seat was filled by Ron Bernard from the Algonquins of Pikwakanagan. He has since retired, and I would also like to publicly thank Ron for his exceptional service and dedication to this file over the years. He brought a great deal of knowledge and experience to this file, and I just wanted to publicly say Chi Miigwech to Ron Bernard for that, all of his years of service. So I'm going to just scroll down here quickly to the mandate. So with regards to the mandate, just to give you folks an idea, they're mandated to respond to the handling, transfer, and return of remains, sacred areas, burial sites, and also advise on strategies for protecting Indigenous remains, sacred areas, burial and heritage sites, items and artifacts. Principles. So the principles, they begin with the Indigenous teachings and law, and that prevails over all other laws. So this is where we really lean on our elders and knowledge keepers to provide these principles. So under procedures, again, the advisory committee, we meet on a regular basis. Typically 2 to 3 months is pretty typical for the committee. However, lately they've been meeting more and more because they're restarting again. Number 2 here. So what they do is they bring forward and discuss issues and stating concerns relative to their nation's communities and regions. So we can raise as a member, I can raise issues to this group for support to any of our 39 communities, and our elder reps can do the same as well. So this number 2 here, raising those issues of concern, this is in addition to what they're doing right now under the Return of Ancestors project. So this is the Return of Ancestors project is a huge project. It involves multiple communities throughout the province of Ontario. And we're looking at returning ancestors and sacred items back to their home communities from facilities located within 3 locations, Thunder Bay, Midland, and London. So they're in the process of doing that and determining what's there and what communities they belong with, right? So I think that's probably pretty good there. Number 8, evaluation mechanism. I'm not going to get into that. That's a Chiefs of Ontario internal thing. Okay, so what I'll do now is I'm gonna reshare here just finally here to finish this off. I'll share this. I hope everyone can see that. The Chiefs of Ontario Special Chiefs Assembly Resolution 1234. This is what was referenced in the draft terms of reference. So I'm going to skip down to the therefore be it resolved, if I can. Therefore be it resolved. Okay, what's key here is number 2, acknowledge First Nations Ipperwash Task Force. Oops. This is where this all comes from. This is where they get the overall mandate from, is from the First Nations Ipperwash Task Force. So this comes out of those recommendations. And we're looking at here the first sentence here, or the first one says, a First Nations Burial Heritage Site Advisory Committee comprised of elders, knowledge keepers, and Indigenous experts be summoned for leadership, direction, and guidance on issues related to the handling, transfer, and repatriation of remains and valuables, sacred items, and artifacts to appropriate Indigenous nations and descendants for proper burial and stewardship. And also what I'd like to highlight here is number 3, direct the establishment of that said advisory committee that was stated above there, that will act as a chief's advisory board, charged with the responding to the handling, transfer, and repatriation of remains and valuables to the appropriate nations. So that's about all I have. And as I say, those documents should be in the kits. If not, we can have those made available. And those were also provided, I believe those were also provided at the regional meeting. So I will turn it back over to Ogama Henry.
Yeah, miigwech, Kevin. So during the session, there was a couple of names put forward again, as I mentioned. One was Michael Henry. Michael's my dad, for full disclosure, but he's participated in 30 plus repatriations with Brandy George, who is the archaeologist working with COO. He's a 3rd-degree member of the Medewan Society and is quite versed in traditional practices around burial rites and funeral rites and such. But his physical work on site with anthropologist Michael Spence and archaeologist Brandy George put him in a good position, not just from the traditional knowledge aspect, but also from the physical aspect, understanding of what happens on an archaeological site. I mean, that practical part of it is very important when we're talking about reclaiming our ancestors and things going forward. So that's why I put his name forward. I mean, maybe I'm a bit partial because he's my father, but also he's had the hands-on, like literally hands-on experience on this and works well with Brandy. So that's why it was. So Chimigwech for the detailed presentation, Kevin.
Miigwech for that, Ogama Henry. Yes, I would also like to state that I have had the pleasure to work with Mike Henry and benefit from his experience, and I found him to be very knowledgeable as well. Just to sort of clarify the Heritage and Burials Group Keyway, it's made of 2. I just want to make this clear. It's made of 2 separate groups. There's an Elders Knowledge Keepers Advisory Committee, and then there's a Technical Policy Committee. I'm on the Technical Policy Committee. I'm the Anishinaabe Nation rep there. And on the Elders Advisory Committee, this is the seat that we're looking to fill. Together, both groups comprise of what's called Keyway. That's the traditional name. And I believe that is a combination of Anishinaabe and Lenape languages, meaning bringing our ancestors home. So with that's all I have. Miigwech.
Ogama Henry, and
I'll also take any questions if anyone has any.
Are there any questions or comments? Okay, I don't see any hands up. Ogama, did you have anything to pose?
I just said Nahau Miigwech.
Okay, sounds good. Miigwech, Ogama Henry. Okay, so I guess we've arrived at our last DODEM for the Assembly, Miigwech DODEM, the Eagle Clan, Employment, Training, and Lifelong Learning. And we have a presentation presentation today from the Kinnamazwin Education Body on AES membership update. And we have Christine Dokis, Director of Education, Kinnamazwin Education Body, and Tracy O'Donnell, KEB Lead Negotiator, Legal Counsel. So I'll turn it over to that group.
Gary. Ani Bojo, Wabanon Kwed, Disnakaz, Ganoze Dodem, Dokis Dunjaba. My name is Christine Dokis, and it's a pleasure to be here to provide an update to you today. I want to start out, we do have a PowerPoint that Corey can, or Shay can put up for us. In the interest of time, I'm just going to really talk briefly about the PowerPoint, but before that, I'd like to start my presentation on legacy issues in the areas of education and child well-being. We need our people to be educated so they understand our history in order to help us change the future. We need to acknowledge the past by ensuring our school systems have Indigenous culture, language, and history written into the curriculum from an Indigenous perspective. At KEB, we're ensuring the proper supports are in place in all education systems to properly support our students' success and well-being. We're working closely with the child well-being to provide adequate resources to enable communities, child welfare organizations to keep Indigenous families together where it is safe to do so, and to keep children in culturally appropriate environments. We're building stronger recognition of Indigenous culture, and the more children are taught about the residential legacy, the history, the more a change will come about. They need to grow up with a sense of identity. So if we can have the presentation put up. We got Shay. All right, so I'm just going to highlight some of the points. If you can go to the next slide, please. So we have signed a new multi-year action plan as of September 8th with a new 3-year work plan by the KEB in Ontario. Next slide, please. Go back one more, sorry. All right, so I'm going to pass this part over to Tracy for the negotiation of the next education fiscal transfer agreement.
So the Kinnamazwin Education Body is negotiating with the Government of Canada next or a renewed fiscal arrangement, and this is anticipated to take effect on April 1, 2023. And we are consulting with the First Nations to address their educational priorities and issues as we go through this process. And during this time of negotiation, we're also inviting Anishinaabeg First Nations that are currently not part of the Anishinaabeg education system to consider whether they'd like to join the system at this time. And if you want to, then you just need to contact the Kinnamazwin Education Body. We'll do presentations to share information on what the system has to offer and the impact of funding through this system to your First.
Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? Congrats, Tracy. Updates on priority initiatives. So we do have a strategic planning session that is underway, and we're hoping to have a final draft strategic plan that'll be presented to the chiefs at the 23 PFN gathering in November of 2021. We also have a AES funding formula that we have engaged with Strategy Corp to be able to provide that draft funding formula that's also going to be presented to the chiefs in the spring of 2022. The next slide. We also have a capital needs assessment that is underway. We are asking for community information to be collected and analyzed from December 2020 to July 2021. And we're hoping for a final AES capital needs assessment report to be completed in March of 2022. And miigwech to all those First Nations that are participating in that initiative. We also have the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan that we are exploring the opportunity of joining the OTPP for all eligible AES teachers and education employees. If directed to proceed, the KEB will submit application for designation in spring of 2022 for implementation in the fall of 2022. Next slide. So some regional highlights. We have REC #1 in July. Bigtacong Nishnawbek offered a pilot grade 9 reach ahead credit to grade 8 students in REC 1. They participated virtually in a grade 9 food and nutrition course, and there was a lot of success. REC #2, Whitefish River First Nation shout out, and the Huron Superior Catholic District School Board are partnering to implement the ECAN, a culturally competent program developed specifically for AES communities and partner school boards. Next slide. REC3, the 7 PFNs in REC3 are undertaking a multi-phased project that will support the production of a profile booklet and accompanying teacher guide for each PFN. REC4, Aamjiwnaang First Nation is actively asserting jurisdiction in its expansion of grade 1 programming for this year. Beausoleil First Nation recently offered a successful summer reach ahead program as well. Lots of great work going on. Next slide. What's happening now? So recent events, we had a gathering of colleagues for PFNs and school boards partners occurred in September to build those relationships. KAB board and staff retreat held in September, a regional fall meeting that took place throughout October in each of the 4 regions. Our upcoming event, AES Chiefs Visioning Session, November 22nd, and that will be held in North Bay at the Best Western. The 23 participating First Nations gathering, November 23rd, as well as the same location. And of course, we've had a lot of staff changes and new employees, so I won't go through them all, but they're there for your viewing. Next slide. Miigwech, our presentation comes to an end. There is our contact information, and I just want to say again, thank you for having us today. Are there any questions?
It doesn't look like too many hands up there, Christine.
Right.
Okay, so miigwech to Christine and Tracy for the update. That brings us to the end of the agenda, and I guess getting close to the closing for today. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to our co-chair, Jenny.
Thank you, Gary. We have had a very eventful 2 days together, and we do want to thank you yet again for staying with us. Unfortunately, we were not able to achieve quorum at the end of day 1 or today. So we have received instructions that at the Chiefs of Ontario Assembly, the administration will look to have a separate Anishinaabe Nation caucus in which the resolutions that we were not able to get to throughout this assembly, they'll be addressed at that caucus. There are 6 resolutions, and we have also been advised that the presentations, since we have been recording our session, the presentations will be shared with the chiefs, and they'll be time-stamped, advising you in terms of when the presentations are in the recordings for you to be able to just easily be able to find that within the presentations itself by looking at the recording minutes to find the start and the end time for the presentations to assist with your discussions of the resolutions at the Anishinaabe Nation caucus, which will be held at the Chiefs Committee, at the Chiefs of Ontario Assembly that's forthcoming. And with that, we would like to also advise that there is a prize winner for today, and we're happy to announce that it's Elsie Bizayon which is our local Lake Huron Getsik. She has been the successful winner today, and we announced earlier the successful winner for day 1 as well. So congratulations to you both. And we'd like to provide some final comments about the Assembly. Again, there's always so much work that the Anishinaabe Nation is doing. We had the very good fortune to hear from all of our political leadership that talked about the different work that they are doing on behalf of the Anishinaabe Nation and all the First Nations that are members of the Anishinaabe Nation. And they also really stress that they have been hearing a lot from First Nations about the need for grassroots work to be done on behalf of our citizens. And we do thank them for all of the work that they have been doing. We also had the wonderful opportunity to be hosted by Curve Lake First Nation, and we do thank you for that. It has been a wonderful assembly, and unfortunately we weren't able to be in your actual community itself, but we do thank you very much, and we do thank you as well for ensuring that your Gitzik was also able to attend with us throughout the assembly, and we will hear from her as well. And we do want to also acknowledge, and we will have the opportunity to hear from our head Gitzik, Richard Asinaway. I'm always very remarkable in terms of when we see the elders and how they stay throughout the entire assembly for all of the days, and they listen to all of the comments and all of the discussion. And I think that really helps to provide us with a really good way to be within our assemblies, and we do want to acknowledge them for all of the work that they have done. We have heard from all of the different Dodems within the Anishinaabe Nation in terms of the different work that they are doing on behalf of the Anishinaabe Nation and our citizens, and that has been through a variety of different areas. We've heard things such as energy, child well-being. We've heard about the health transformation process. We heard about policing. We have heard about the work ongoing for the residential schools. We've heard about heritage and burials, and we've now heard from the KAB. And of course, there's been many, many other areas that we have heard, and we do want to thank you all for the work that you do on behalf of the Anishinaabe Nation and providing us with those very timely updates and information that you share at the Assembly and also within the Assembly kits. So on my behalf, I would like to thank you for the honor of being your co-chair. It has been a great honor and it has been a privilege. Miigwech. And Gary, would you like to provide some comments? And I do see we also have our Chief Executive Officer that would like to make some comments as well.
Yeah, I see she's had her hand up there for a little bit, so I'll let Marcia go ahead and I'll have some comments.
Miigwech for that, Co-Chair Gary and Co-Chair Jenny. I just wanted to give a reminder that we did get a request to share information about the Sovereign Wealth AGM, which is upcoming November 10th. There was some information that was circulated last week, and again, they are also requiring quorum for that virtual AGM. Again, the dates are November 10th, 10 a.m. And again, they're looking for quorum, and I'm sure we'll be sending information. We have also provided information on our portal, and I just wanted to alert your attention to that. Miigwech.
Hey, Miigwech, Marcia. Just a few closing comments. I'd like to say miigwech to the chiefs for all your work here in the last couple of days. Our Deputy Grand Council Chiefs and Grand Council Chief for the work that you've put in the last couple of days as well. Also the Anishinaabe Nation staff, they always do a great job of planning assemblies, and it's no different being on an online assembly. It was well organized again, as usual. I'd like to thank Jenny as my co-chair. Enjoyed working with her the last couple of days to try and get us to this point, and also to the Getsit that we heard and the drum that we heard yesterday, and also our head Getsit, Richard. I look forward to hearing from him again in a few minutes. I've been to a lot of assemblies, as you're aware, in the last about 15 years or so. The first time in this role, but it was quite enjoyable seeing everybody again and listening to all discussion in the last couple of days. Reminds me there's still lots of work to do in the nation, so I think we'll be having assemblies for quite a while yet. So at this point, I'd just say miigwech and turn it back to Jenny.
Miigwech. And it's our honor and privilege to hear from our Grand Council Chief to provide some closing comments.
Ani Bonjour. I'll keep it quick as possible. So miigwech to the Gima and the Gimakwe for your attendance, discussion, input, and your time. I know your time is very precious. Actually, we were discussing between the session here on ways to maximize your time here and maybe be mindful of it, you know, so that we have resolutions and get through things a little bit quicker for yourselves. Miigwech to our co-chairs for their excellent facilitation, Jenny and Gary. Miigwech Gary for wearing the captain's hat. It's always good to see. Miigwech to all our presenters. Miigwech to our Gitsigid and Quewak councils. Miigwech to our head gets it, Richard Sinaway. Miigwech to our opening drum, Wishkigumong woman. Miigwech for opening Thanksgiving from Dorothy Taylor. Miigwech to Gimakwe Emily Wheatung and her community for hosting. Miigwech to the Anishinaabe Nation staff for working in the background and keeping everything running smoothly. And Miigwech to Engaged as our technical host. And of course, finally, it is Treaty Week, and please refer to the Anishinaabe Nation website and Facebook page for treaty resources during this time. Miigwech.
Miigwech Grand Council Chief. We would now like to invite Dorothy Taylor, our local Gitsit, to provide a closing acknowledgement.
Nahabosho Nimkikapaneshi Kwandish Nakaswabagagdodim Chimigwachka for inviting me to this very important gathering of the Anishinaabe Nations. And I appreciate, and I know our communities appreciate all the work that you have put into it and all the work that's going to be done. You know, we're in Treaty Week now, and we understand that, you know, our ancestors, they signed those treaties for us, thinking of the children's children onto 7 generations, which is us. This day, we are flourishing because of the sacrifices that our ancestors have made. So I say Chimiigwech to those ancestors. And so I'll just pray, you know, our communities and our nations are healing in this time, even though we have gone through so much loss, loss of land, culture, language, even our children were stolen. So how we heal as a community as we go forward into the future and for the children of the 7 times 7 generations is through forgiveness. So I'll be saying that word in my closing. Nahabosho kashamanado imkikapaneshi kwandish nakaso bagagdodam Chimiigwech sanongam kashamanado kwashkadad yagma au niniwak kwawag Chimiigwech gaging sakaushatuyan na say when minapamadzion. Chimiigwech kashamanado minawaga kinamage when Abuyan Damoyan Apchagapane Chawasa Chimiigwech Kashamnado Minawaga Gitchanandam Sanongam Hashwaminishna Shamanado Kashamnado Kanodwion Keep us in Wion in the Mayon. Aha, Miigwech. Yeah.
Miigwech. We would now like to invite the Anishinaabe Nation head Gitsit, Richard Sinaway, to provide us with the closing Thanksgiving.
Bonjour. I'd like to say Chimiigwech to all the Gimak that brought something to this table. All the concerns, all our struggles. And I feel for you, the beauties that you have to move forward. And the struggles you may still have with this. And I'd like to thank you for having that courage to keep going. And I'm proud of you. And to all the guests that are here, goodbye. That came and spoke. And also our legal counsels that represent us. And everyone else at Anishinaabe Nation putting this together. I've been looking from way afar, listening to Anishinaabe nations as they grew. When I stepped into their circles back in 1996, 99. And I watched it, where it went, where it's gone, where our leaders took us. And here we are. A lot of them have gone on now. Our district have gone on, but they left something behind. We can't forget that, what they left with us. Yes, at one time, listening to everybody here yesterday and today, Nishnawbek had it right one time. I'm talking about way, way back in our ancestors' days. In time back. Nishnawbek had it all right. Whatever happened, something happened along their journeys. Then we'll start taking the wrong avenue. Of course, we all know why. It's what was brought to us, brought to them. And today we use what they still used. What is that? Is those 4 elements, sacred elements. Kodet, Nebet, Ket, Mutu, 4 elements, sacred elements. Even the medicines they used, it's not just their little ceremonies. All those things never changed. Never have and never will. What happened? We're the ones that changed. It's us, individually. We're the ones that changed. It's because what was done, what was taken away from us. Even from our ancestors at that time, what was taken away from them. They tried everything to take away. But one thing they couldn't take away from us is our Anishinaabe pride. We have that still. It still exists. But how did they do it back then? Our ancestors. They used their minds in such a good way. How? Pure, clean. In order for them to do something to move forward, they had a vision. Maybe one of them chiefs had a vision, or someone had a vision what to do. Maybe they knew they need to move camp. Maybe their food source is running low. They had a vision. Or where to build. They had a vision. And once they had that vision, they went by that. And they went with that vision. Today, and I've seen it growing up myself, even in my community back home, that we've lost that. It's coming back slowly. Now today, nobody's taking the time to create that vision. I've heard part of it here. It's housing. That's one of them. What's happening in our communities is nobody's taking the time to create that vision, where to build, a subdivision, where to plot. What's happening? We're taking shortcuts. We're building too fast. And what happens? Problems start. Foundations, water damage. This goes on. And we need to go back to that and use that gift of vision, how we were given by Manitou. See those things. And yet, here we are now talking about from way, way back. We need to hear those history stories. In order to create something, we have to think and work like our animals. For instance, a Mick, a beaver. A Mick is a massive builder. That's the only one in this world that doesn't need a building permit to create a dam. Why is that? It's given that gift to use its mind. And when it builds that dam, it's going to feed all other sources that are out there, resources. Feeds them. But what does it do? It will maintain that dam over and over and over. He just doesn't build it. He'll look after it. And that's the same thing with our housing. We need to build them, yes. We need to look after them, maintenance. And that same thing with our spirituality, our ways of life. Building it, you gotta keep maintaining. Keep maintaining it. Yes, I too was triggered here yesterday and today. I'm one of them, of many. I went to these schools. And I tear down inside when I hear stories still today. And when I first heard this introduction of TRC, I was kind of like, I looked at it like I was insulted. And they even asked me, you're entitled to this. We'll give you $10,000. I go, really? So if I put my name on the dotted line, you're going to give me $10,000. Yes. I said, I don't think so. How come? I have my reason. Come on, you can do it. Okay then. Maybe I will then. What you're saying is, once I sign here, you're going to give me that $10,000. I says, you know what I can do with that $10,000 now? You go, what? I can buy $10,000 worth of toilet paper. But if that runs out, then what? That will never, never be enough. There's more people out there that went through a harder times than I did. And they can serve me. And where's the equality? Yeah. Yes, I believe that needs to be revisited. But there's so much, all of us, we earn as we go along, even me. What I do, I didn't choose to do. I was chosen by Manitou, showing me his gifts. And for all of us to come together, one day we will go home with them, sit with them. But how are we going to get there? That's when the Anishinaabe made a symbol. We go by symbols, we go by pictures of our ancestors used to live that way. One day we'll go home with this right here. And that's a marking that we are done here. That's an old traditional burial. Marking of pipestone paint. When we go home. They will recognize us. Oh, you did my job, you left. Huh? I wish you could say, Mom, what's your left? So I heard identity here. It's very important to know who we are and our people in general, our communities, to help them understand who they are, because a lot of them are lost. Sometimes we get lost. The work that we all do. We're not perfect. We will never will be. The thing is, we got to try and remember not to forget. Manga over here, with all this education that we have, very good. Nothing wrong with that. We need that. But here's what happens to Anishinaabe. Not all. No, you didn't do. They carry this education so high, and here's where they're at. But only if we can put this, bring this down, and put these two together. It'd be amazing what you can do, but not to ever, ever forget who you are and where you come from. There's also, I have something here. You've seen this everywhere. Shaker. What is this? Yeah, it's a shaker. what is it? I'm gonna translate it. Let's say this is a key. This is a key towards healing. This is a key to enter in another dimension in this world, to communicate with spirits. That's a key. Now that key you have as well. You have those keys. A key to your car, the key to your home. That's the only way you're gonna get in there. Without that key, you can't. So what is that key to life? Awareness. You have to have awareness. That's the key. Without awareness, you're going to be lost. So the Gemak, I'd like to thank you. I saw you here today. I want to meet you one day in person. Some already met already. Devo, don't forget your mark. The marks that was given to us to represent something. That same mark will be going home to. What is that mark you have? Is your hat. Always wear those. Never put that down. Maybe at home. But when you come together, to be good, wear it. You were given that. And Gordon said that many times. Everybody had to get it, don't forget. He always reminded us. Always. And he still does today. Spirit. I know. So these kitchen again, we talked about gifts. Way back in those days that I talked about, our ancestors, not one of them ever talked about the 7 grandfather teachings to their tribal people. Not once. Why? Because they lived it. They lived that. Today it's here now. There's posters everywhere. Mr. Google knows those teachings, and Mrs. Yahoo. You see them on there. There's elders helping us in workshops. Why? Is to help us understand our gifts. That's why they're there, to remind us what we're all given. So with that, I'll say Jimmy Rich, everyone that is here. You guys are doing great work. I know there's a lot of challenges up there. But I'll leave you with this. The way to do this is this. You reminded me when I was a little boy. I used to watch my parents work on their crossword, their puzzles on the table. I couldn't barely look over and see. And every evening they did that. And I see that puzzle start to close in. And then one night I saw it. I'm going, they're going to finish that tonight. You know what? I didn't want them to. What did I do? I took one of those pieces off the table and I put it in my pocket. And they sent me off to bed. I woke up early in the morning. I ran down to that table. I looked at it. And one piece was missing. I grabbed that piece and I put it right in there. I was so proud that I did something. I accomplished something. It was done. Completed. That's the same way I see here. All the chiefs, all across the Nishnawbe Nation. You have those pieces. Bring them in. Find those pieces. Don't be frustrated if that piece doesn't fit. Maybe you need to tweak it. Maybe you need to turn it around. But as you're going along, you will still see it, that this puzzle is almost completed, but there'll still be pieces missing. You will get there one day. Well, that Will that puzzle be finished in our lifetime? Maybe, maybe not. But maybe one day it will be, maybe 500 years from now, I don't know. But bring in your peace, bring in your knowledge, bring in your gift. And that's the only way we're gonna do it, is coming together and get this puzzle going and draw it out. I'll be rich.
Miigwech. We would like to now invite Janet McHugh to provide us with our traveling song. Miigwech. That concludes our 2021 Fall Anishinaabe Nation Grand Council Assembly. Safe travels, everyone.
Miigwech, Bamapi.
Bamapi Minwa.
Bamapi.
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 Bamapi. Bamapi. Miigwech, everybody.
Bamapi.